Going live. All right. Let's see what we got here. Make sure all the volumes are all good. Doesn't look like we're spiking there. Let's give it a good 1, 2, 3, 4 test. Make sure all the volumes are all good. Doesn't look like we're spiking there. Let's give it a good 1, 2, 3, 4 test. It is a little bit hot. Okay, make sure all the volumes are all good. Doesn't look like we're spiking there. Let's give it a good 1, 2, 3, 4 test. It is a little bit hot. Okay, make sure all the volumes are all good. It's kind of funny. It'll loop and loop and loop. Sorry for that, folks. Got to get this tested up and working now. Hey, nobody's on the screen yet anyway, just me. Still got another minute anyway before I take the show live. This is the pre-stream while I figure out and tweak the volumes a bit to make sure I've got the best optimal volumes possible. Take a listen. Okay, that's all right. Oh, somebody joined me. Welcome to the show. Another 30 seconds or so before we go live. This is going to be a YouTube only live stream. Feel free to pop in with questions as we go along here. I like questions. Questions are fun. Let's see what we got. That's it. We're 7. Time to take this live. Off we go. WordPress. It's the most popular content management and website solution on the internet. And with over 80,000 plugins to choose from, how do you separate the junk from the gems? Join us for a weekly, unrehearsed conversation about the latest and greatest in WordPress plugins. This is WordPress Plugins from A to Z. Well, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you happen to be hiding out there on the globe today. Coming to you direct from the Brewery Overlook in beautiful Victoria, British Columbia, Canada. This is an extra live show of the WP Plugins A to Z podcast, which this one here will only be live on YouTube. I won't put it into the podcast feed or anywhere else. This is something that I've been talking about for the last few days. You heard me mention it in the podcast last week. I may have mentioned it. I mentioned it in the special show I did on Friday, the one I did on Saturday. And that is, I wanted to do a total critique of the state of the word from Matt Mullenweg. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to play the video. And unfortunately, I couldn't find a link to the video that I'll be using, but it is the entire video. And for some reason, that link has vanished from the web. It's a good thing I downloaded the video to save it instead of having to deal with all the broken up pieces that now exist. So this will be fun, entertaining. If you got questions, pop them in there. I'm going to try to critique this and have a little fun along the way, just discussing everything that is going on with it. Without much further ado, let's dive right into Matt Mullenweg and the State of the Word for 2018.
Welcome to State of the Word, Nashville, Tennessee, at WordCamp United States 2018. There's been a lot that's been going on, so I'd actually like to allow WordPress a chance to reintroduce itself. It is the reason we're here. WordPress isn't a physical thing. It's not a set of code. It's kind of an idea. It's backed by the full faith and credit of every person and company that depends on it. It only exists in the space between our heads and our minds. It has a constitution. It's built on the 4 freedoms. The freedom to run the program for any purpose, freedom to study how the program works and change it, to redistribute it, and to share your changed versions. This is like our Bill of Rights. It's the fundamental things that's included with every single copy of WordPress and every single plugin and theme that you get from it, certainly the ones you get from WordPress.org. This freedom is not just theoretical, it's practical. The data in WordPress is totally portable. You can run it just about anywhere, from Amazon Web Services to Raspberry Pi. And as we like to say, it is both free and priceless at the same time.
Oh, absolutely, Matt.
Another beautiful thing about WordPress is its scalability. And I don't mean this purely in the sort of technical sense, that it can run a small site to something that runs hundreds of millions of pages per day. But you can keep WordPress with you your entire life, and it'll grow with you, and you can grow with it. It's one of the few things on the internet and in technology that you can be sure that what you put into it, you'll be able to either use it or get out a decade later. And we've been doing this now for 15 years. And who got to make it to the sponsor section today? See some of the booths? Get some cool t-shirts, some cool socks. Like, you really don't even need a pack for WordCamp. You can just come with that day's clothes and you can kind of fill up the rest once you get here. WordPress is supported by a really robust commercial ecosystem. One that I estimate, represented by the companies in those in that sponsor hall and others, to be over
$10 billion. That's one hell of an ecosystem to be messing with. We'll see, though. We will.
$10 billion per year. So you add all this up together, and we're united by a common mission, which we say is democratizing publishing. Now, what does that mean? I know Morten talked a little bit about this earlier. To us, democratize means that everyone can use it, regardless of the language they speak, the device used, physical ability, income or economic ability, location, and finally, technical proficiency. You add all this up, and you look at the last 15 years of work, it combines to about a 32.5% market share, which is coming along, almost to a third. And like I said a few years ago, we're building a web operating system. It's an operating system for the open, independent web, and a platform that others can truly build on. It's also why we're all here. And if you are watching this on the live stream or later on a video, or you're here in this room, we'll put some more chairs in next time. Sorry. You're in rarefied air compared to the vast majority of WordPress users that will never watch a video like this, that will never come to a WordCamp. And the primary experience of it is just the software.
I've pretty much got that little point right. You know, it's a small percentage of the entire WordPress user base and community that shows up for WordCamps or takes the time out to watch these. I mean, I've often just not bothered with the state of the word before, except for the snippets I caught here and there. This is probably one of the first time in about 4 or 5 years I've watched the entire thing. So we're watching it again, and we'll just keep going, Matt. Let's take it off.
And as you may have noticed, as we were filing in, we had some inspirational quotes on loop. It might have been something you recognized in your own experience or someone you've helped. As far as WordPress has come, I think it's good to remind ourselves that we have maybe even further to go, that we do have a lot of problems. There's been a lot of questions this year about why we're doing certain things, like why we're working on Gutenberg. And I think it's good to return always to users to find that. So we're going to go through something that is super awkward. And this is watching user test videos. Who's ever done this before?
Oh, yes. They're fun.
For those of you who didn't raise your hands, please prepare yourself.
Like, something like this needs to be easy to use, and I wouldn't say any of this is easy to use. This is frustrating to use. This feels like writing a blog back in 2005.
Feels like writing a blog back in 2005.
Well, yeah, Matt.
Next up.
Okay.
Add 2 images side by side. Why can't I do that? I would... Yeah, I'm thinking that I want to start here and then we'll put the cursor here and go back, but I'm not able to do so. So...
It gets worse.
Instead,
I'm sure it does. Anytime you watch people who don't know what they're doing, it gets worse. Not sure this is a fair comparison, though, Matt. I really am.
Don't click that.
If I do an align, I'm going to... No, they're going to go right underneath each other.
Add 2 images side by side. Why can't I do that?
Well, you can.
Oh,
You just got to use a page builder.
Now. Some text on the right, so I guess on line right, hello. It's not exactly to the right of it, but it is. Okay.
Oh.
I didn't do that. I was just clicking enter. It's not directly to the right of it, but that's about as best as that's going to go. And then a paragraph below it, so...
Oh, that'd be nice if he did that.
Hard to get the actual...
I don't imagine that's going to happen.
Okay, so we need to go back to there. This is very finicky. This does not work.
This is very finicky. This does not work.
Just move this image up. Why? Why are you not moving?
Why? Because you're not hitting the right spots.
There's more.
I am not seeing an option. So when I go to the Add Media page, there is no video available for me to add.
Add a caption to the video. How would I add a caption? I have no clue.
No sarcasm for me.
This is getting pretty painful, isn't it? How do I add a caption? I have no clue. I will not subject any of us to any more of those. But that kind of was painful, right? I've likened it before to like when you're watching a horror movie and you're like, no, don't go in that room.
Hey, Matt got a laugh. Little teeny one there anyway. I'm not sure it's entirely a fair test there, what he just did, before we dive into the next component, which is, of course, them going to compare how people use the WYSIWYG editor at its base level to the Gutenberg editor, which is an advanced editor. So I'm not sure it's entirely fair, but for what those people were trying to do, there's lots of ways to get around that, free page builders, etc. But anyway, we'll continue on with what Matt's trying to make a point on here.
You see folks just trying to do, and nothing, by the way, that was just described there, I think a reasonable person would say should be that difficult, right? Why should it be that hard to have an image with some text next to it? We've all seen that on web pages hundreds, if not thousands of times.
True.
So when you start
Absolutely.
to try to lay things out, particularly, as you might have guessed, those were all tests with WordPress 4.9, it can be very, very difficult. There's also other things. This is a quote from a review that says, if you've ever tried to copy text from Microsoft Word and then paste it into a poster page with WordPress, then you know it never looks right when you publish it to your blog. Suffice it to say, Word and WordPress are not very compatible.
Now, I want to pause here on this one for half a moment, because years ago, probably 4 or 5 years ago, I can't remember the version they changed it. It wasn't perfect, but it was better than what the system does now. They used to have a paste from Word button in WordPress, and they removed it. And that paste from Word button removed all the HTML that Word and other documents tend to bring along, and so it allowed you to reformat it without a whole lot of irritant and effort of trying to unformat what was needed to be reformatted, because sometimes it's hard to unformat when it's already embedded in the code. So it worked better than it does now, but still not as good, and what he's going to show. So we'll continue.
I like that little closer there. Suffice it to say, this status quo is not good enough. And this has been our editor experience for over a decade now. And for many of us, we've grown used to it or learned to work around. For me, one of the big learning moments was when I realized just how often I was clicking over to code view from the visual view in the WYSIWYG. So I enjoyed composing things in the visual view, but sometimes I'd be trying to put text inside or outside of a link, or put an image at a certain point in a paragraph, and it just wasn't going right. And I'd be like, I wouldn't even think of it actually, because I'm fluent in HTML and CSS. So I would just, and we made the code view switcher so easy to get to, I would just go back and forth all the time. I started to just count that. And then, of course, of writing a post, a simple post, something that shouldn't be difficult, I would sometimes do that 5-10 times.
Yeah.
I bet if we looked around this room to the most elite folks in the WordPress world, we probably have started to take that for granted.
Oh, you're right.
So the concept that we think can fix this is blocks. So what are blocks? Blocks are predictable, tactile, and can be as simple as a text block or as rich as an entire e-commerce interface that you can kind of zoom into when you go to a block. See, the problem with WordPress's and many other CMS's approach in the past with what we were calling WYSIWYG is we tried to hide everything. Gutenberg takes that HTML structure that's behind the page and makes it more explicit, and then simplifies it into the mental model of blocks, which is something that is both more apparent to people and we can reuse across the entire interface. Regardless of how powerful like a block is, for example, an e-commerce one or a video one or some of the ones I'll show you in a little bit, you can interact with them in the same way. They have a consistent interface for adding, deleting, and moving them around and laying them out. Let me show you some videos that are a little bit more fun, which is, let's build a quick little site with Gutenberg.
All right, let's do it. Go.
As Bebo
Wait a minute.
Valdez, who the release was named for, an amazing Cuban musician. Also
Why
the
didn't you
father
get the
of
same
Cuco Valdez,
people
one of
doing
my
the building the
favorite pianists.
website that you
We're
had
coloring
testing?
the image. Oh, look, there's some text
wait.
next to an image.
Wait. Oh, yeah. It's
That
there.
was possible.
Okay, that was quick.
Adding YouTube.
Done. Okay,
Found
video.
one right there.
Yeah,
Make it a
size.
little bigger. Put a
Yeah.
little gallery just to
Okay. Click, 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 click.
Fill it out.
Well, zap, zap, zap. Bang. Bim, boom, bomb. And click, click, click.
Voila.
And published. Voila.
And what we saw
All right.
looks just like what you can now see.
Let's hold that for a second. All right, what he just demonstrated was somebody who knew the Gutenberg editor inside and out, much the same way as someone who would have known the standard WordPress editor inside and out with a page builder or something, who could have done the exact same thing in probably just as much of a 30 or 40 second time, provided all the graphics and everything, and you had all your stuff ready to cut and paste and go. So personally, I don't think it was a fair comparison. I think it was completely unfair, not a very good comparison at all. It was kind of, you were kind of cheating there, Matt. Definitely cheating. All right, continue it on.
On the site. Whew. Oh, thank you. Copying and pasting has also been improved. So this is a Google document. Pretty complex, got some layout, got some images, got some different things. About to Control-A to select all. We can paste right there. Look, exactly what we saw, works just fine. This works for Google Docs, it works for Quip, it works for Office 365, it even works for Microsoft Word. So Word and WordPress, suffice it to say, can now work together.
Now that's a cool feature. I do
We
like
also had some
that
cool
feature there.
developer features that we're curious to see
That's
how
the
people are gonna
one
take
thing
advantage.
that does kind of
So
interest
this is
me.
actually exporting a block.
Let me find out
So you
more
can
about
take any
this though.
reusable block and it'll give you a little chunk of JSON. You can then go and take that chunk of JSON, as this is
Okay.
a pretty meaty one, and upload that into, we can import from JSON,
I think I just saw him export it. I'm not
create
sure.
a reusable block, and then you can use that to start a page.
One way or
Post
another. I'm
one.
not sure how that was done. That was like really
Building on a
quick.
common
Bang, bang, it was
pattern
done.
That we've seen in WordPress page builders.
Yeah.
Ta-da.
That's a cool
everything we just
feature.
saw.
That's definitely a cool
So this
feature,
is,
and it'll be very nice.
What we've been calling Gutenberg.
Yeah.
It is the bulk of what we've been working on the past few years, and it's been going fairly well.
And it's a theme killer.
We put out Gutenberg as a plugin. It started first, actually, if people might not remember, but the first few months, it was actually just purely in JavaScript, which is part of the reason it's been so embeddable and really easily reused by other projects. We turned it into a plugin, kind of summer last year. Summer of this year, we started promoting it a lot more. And prior to the 5.0 release, got it to 1.2 million active installs and a run rate of about 40,000, just under 40,000 posts per day. It's a huge amount of activity, over 8,000 commits from over 340 unique contributors. And we've also been talking about it everywhere we can. At WordCamps, we've had 277 WordCamp talks on it, 555 meetup events, and over 1,000 blog posts done across the various WordPress-related things talking about Gutenberg. So Gutenberg was out as a plugin, and the reason for doing that was both to get it more widely tested and to allow the ecosystem to start to build around it.
No, you did manage to do
We've seen some
that.
great results there so far from themes. So we've got over 100 Gutenberg themes already on the directory. We have a new Gutenberg block tag that is currently live for plugins and will be live for themes very soon.
Okay.
We're launching with that the 2019 theme.
There's more about that
which,
in the
as you
question
can
and
see,
answer segment
has
at the
both a
end.
beautiful front end. That matches exactly what you see in the WP admin.
See, that's
So
kind of a nice
2019 was our
feature.
idea to
Gotta
show
admit,
off
it is a nice
what
feature.
sort of Gutenberg native theme can do, and it's not even what's going to be able to come. People have already been building beautiful sites with Gutenberg. Here is the Indigo Mill, and showing both the site and some of the blocks that it's using. It's paragraph block, button block, image blocks, media and text.
Yeah.
A really cool one called Luminous Solar that was actually using some more custom blocks. But again, this is a site that if you were to tell someone to do in a WYSIWYG of WordPress before,
White space.
only
We're
using
getting
WYSIWYG,
lots of
not
white
using a
space in
special
themes
theme, not
now.
using
I'm
special
noticing
templates, anything
that.
else, would have been basically
About
possible.
time. We needed white space.
Some of you might recall a few years ago, I exhorted everyone to learn JavaScript deeply. How's that been going?
Well, you know,
Huh? Who feels
lots
like
of
they've
lots of
gotten
us has
JavaScript
other things to do.
deeply down pat? We've got at least a dozen people. All right. Phase 2 will be easy. It is a challenging language. So I'm going to actually say something a lot easier as homework from this one, which is to learn blocks deeply. This is actually pretty fun. XWP made a Jenga set that corresponds to Gutenberg blocks, which I thought was some of the coolest swag I've seen this year, so good job, XWP.
Cute.
But as I said, the blocks are the new fundamental building blocks. They're the DNA. They're the sort of musical notes that we can then build everything else on, much like Western music has kind of 12 different notes or tones. Everything is built from that. A few chords, like in a song like the blues, 3 basic chords. These are what you can create almost anything you can imagine from. So far with blocks, we have about 70 native blocks, over 100 third-party blocks, over 1,000 different layer configuration and different blocks related to that.
So we're going to stop for a moment here and talk about, they've got all these blocks. Now, blocks are going to be a very important thing. You'll hear more about them later in the State of the Word and in the question and answer segment and what's going to happen with blocks. It's going to lead me to some more things I want to discuss, but that they've got 70 native blocks, 100 third-party plus. Well, there's more than 100 third-party plus blocks. There's companies are popping up, much like theme companies and plugin companies. Block companies are popping up, creating custom blocks for Gutenberg. So this is going to be interesting on how it's going to take the WordPress market and what's going to do with it. But we'll discuss what I think about the WordPress market later, though many people have heard that I think probably 30% of the market's going to vanish and disappear or follow off over to the classic press area, because there's just people that will not be able to use Gutenberg for their businesses while they want the WordPress core, which is a fantastic thing to have. So carry on there, Matt.
Here are some blocks in the wild. So built into Gutenberg, and now in your new block editor in WordPress 5.0, there's
well,
a
no,
that lets
they
you
don't
kind of search,
want
find
that.
things.
I'll pause for a second there just for that comment, because that comment's kind of relevant. Yeah, he didn't include any conversation with the largest theme providers and page builders because this supplants them. It's going to set them aside, and it's going to kill the market. You'll hear Matt almost admit to that point blank in the question and answer period at the end. And unfortunately, this is going to be a long video because the State of the Word, including question and answer, hour and 22 minutes, and with me breaking in, it extends the time frame. So I'm expecting 2 hours for this. So if you don't like it, if you're watching live, sorry. If you're watching later on, skip towards the end. It's probably going to be about the hour and a half mark, hour and 20 to hour and a half mark when we're hit the question and answer period.
Go for it. We've also had, with the interface of blocks, plugins like Yoast SEO, now being able to give you per block readability analysis. We have blocks like this one, 360 Image by Kevin Bazira. It allows you to embed VR 360 images, so the sort of marrying of Gutenberg and VR is finally happening a little bit. Google did their AMP block, Google and Friends, I should say, that can give you per block suggestions on whether the content is AMP compatible. Drop It from Riyadh, right here in the front row, shows you can kind of bring in images and Giphies and things. E-commerce has been early adopters of blocks, so this is an Ecwid store. By the way, I love that preview. It embeds the entire store right there. You can click through it from that one block. For WooCommerce, there's a products block, lets you choose what you're showing. So this is choosing the music category. It shows it very inline right as you're editing it. And then again, you publish it. It looks great on the front end, right there. And then BigCommerce, new entrance to WordPress and also new sponsor, so thank you. Shows you can add products, remove products, show what's there, and then on the front end, it looks fantastic. We've got profile blocks. We've got recipe blocks. Yeah, someone likes to cook. We've got tarot card blocks. So if you want to predict the future of WordPress, I think you can use this one.
Yeah, I don't think the future of WordPress
this was a
is
block
overly
written with
bright.
only about, I think it was 137 lines of code by Dennis Snell, just kind of showing off that using the new React JavaScript framework that Gutenberg's written in, you can create this really cool little sketch thing. We've got blocks within blocks within blocks. So the one cool one to check out is a Jetpack contact form block.
Oh, plug for Jetpack.
It's actually
Good
just
job,
a
Matt.
series of nested blocks.
You're
So it provides
shameless promotions of your own
both has
products.
the functionality,
Proud of
full
you.
blocks, but also the accessibility. So all the work we did for accessibility around ARIA labels, keyboard navigation, everything is inherited by all the sub-blocks. There's some fun ones. Longtime WordPress community member Nick Hamsey has made some fun ones, including a guide post. This is kind of like an automatic table of contents. So as you add headings, it'll automatically create that table of contents. Ghostwriting, which I hadn't seen before.
This is kind of interesting.
Instead of, you can ghost write the WordPress. 5 people got that reference. So make it Ghostwriter, publish it, and then on the front end.
I didn't get the reference, so.
See, it's coming in. See, that wasn't too scary. I
Nice
also
try,
really
Matt.
like his spoiler alert block. So that says out. So you ever write about a movie? Everyone lives. Make it a spoiler alert. Let's also style it a little better. So we can make that bigger. Large fonts, maybe a different background color. Publish it, and now on the front end, click to reveal. Ta-da!
Useful item, but I bet there's a plugin for that already.
Will now be safe. We've also seen the design aspects of Gutenberg started to be really taken advantage of. This is one of my other favorite ones I've seen so far. It's called the Caxton Shape Divider block from Poodle Press. Hope I'm pronouncing that right. So as you can see, what they're doing is sort of choosing different kind of shapes that can go in between the blocks, matching the colors of the blocks that came before and after it. So I think we got some waves in there. I think we're also going to show a cloud one, which I really like, because sometimes I get asked whether WordPress runs in the cloud.
Absolutely.
I love
Cloud
that
is just
preview.
somebody else's computer anyway.
Go watch it all day. And so this shows, as you can see, creates this into beautiful transitions between blocks. It actually addresses one of my key worries when we started creating blocks, was that everything people were creating with them looked, well, rather blocky.
There you go.
So bringing the different shapes, I think, really helps.
That does help, but it's still
There
going
are
to leave it blocky.
collections being created everywhere you can expect.
And I'm
these
not
are
sure it's
plugins
going to
that
give us
include
the
many
same
different
fancy
There's
looks.
even third-party
We'll
libraries.
pause that for a second. I'm not sure it's going to give us even the nice, same fancy looks we get with a lot of themes now that lay things out. Now, of course, one thing about the web, if you've been around as long as many of us have, when I was doing this back in the late 90s and early 2000s in pure HTML, that's all you had was blocks, and you just had to find ways to arrange blocks so they look cool. And of course, WordPress did that well. And this new system is almost like looking backwards on HTML with advanced technology. It's really kind of a mix mash of it. And maybe Automatic should stick to WP comma and leave the org alone. Well, maybe, but the thing is a project of this size needs somebody to lead it and to do it, even if they make decisions that are problematic with people. Now, I'm not a cheerleader here by any stretch of the imagination. You just look at all the tweets and everything I put out there. It's like I've not been overly thrilled with this. Given a little more time, I would have adapted to it a whole lot easier. I am going to adapt to it, but I'm also going to have to adapt to another area just based on my business alone. Anyway, we'll move it along here. Continue on with the blocks, Matt.
So places you can go online. This is editorblockswp.com, has a huge library. The Gutenberg Hub is talking about them. GutenbergCloud.org, which is also the same folks who have already ported Gutenberg to Drupal and are launching sites for clients live with Gutenberg and Drupal combined.
That's an interesting thought.
Ahmad Awais, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, created an amazing framework called the Gutenberg Toolkit that is actually responsible and behind. It's kind of been used to create the vast majority of all the blocks I just showed you, which is kind of amazing. So let's do a quick round of applause for Ahmad for creating that. It's very impressive. There's been a few others, like the Block Lab, the Lazy Blocks, which allow you to create blocks right from within WP admin, so it's kind of a visual builder for blocks. And on amazing sites like CSS Tricks, there are now Gutenberg and tutorials for blocks. So that's where we've been. For this next bit, I'd like to invite on, is Ginny nearby? We've got, this is a very real support message that came in, actually on WordPress.com, because as WordPress.com was rolling out, there was different states you could be in where you'd get some Gutenberg or some not Gutenberg, and you're going to read, it's actually in French, and you're going to read the French, or read the English. Oh, read the French.
Probably best if I do the French.
Yeah.
You do the English?
Yeah, I'll do the English.
Let's go for it.
But you got a mic already.
Yeah,
wow, we're
I'm all
getting
mic'd up,
fancy.
ready to go. Ready?
Yes.
Je n'arrive pas à construire ma page, c'est trop difficile.
I love French.
What does that mean?
So
I thought you were going to tell
blunt.
There's no notes.
Oh dear. This job is more than I thought it was going to be. I cannot make my page, it's too difficult. And then he goes on to say, je veux avoir un éditeur simple pour construire ma page. I want a simple editor to be able to build my page.
Okay. Now, I love this thing here because they saying it's a guy who's contacting them after Gutenberg launched. Click that content, like blocks of content. Okay. You see, he asks, he's having troubles constructing his page. It's too difficult. He wants an editor that's simple for constructing his page. And then they ask, do you remember if it looked like this? And we have no idea what look like this is, with plus signs that you could click to add content onto the page, like blocks of content. And then he's like, oui. Well, the guy was thinking, well, they're assuming that it looked like that before he contacted him. Well, it did look like that before he contacted him, but did it look like the other editor that was there before? The guy's having difficulties. I think they confused this up and they tried to use this as a item that says, oh, this guy here came from the old editor and now he's on the new editor. Well, let's see how Matt handles this, but personally I think it's completely off base as to what they think this is.
And then the support response was, do you remember, oh, there's one more.
Oh, that's all
Do you remember what it looked like? Was it this with the plus signs that you could click to add content? So initially, the support person thought that they were asking to go back to the old WYSIWYG because there's been so much in the community saying how the old one was simpler. And did it have the plus content, like blocks of content? And the response was, oui.
Oui.
Oui, but
Thank you.
I don't think the Frenchman understood what he was asking. Because the response to a Frenchman was in English. And
I know, despite WordCamp Paris,
yeah.
I did not quite get
I don't
my
think he did
French
that one
down.
right. I think that was a poor example.
This was so cool that actually this person new to WordPress was saying that this thing, which in some ways is much, much more difficult and has a lot more complexity, more buttons to click and things to do, was actually simpler than the WYSIWYG that it replaced for what they were trying to accomplish. This is exactly what we're trying to do with this whole 2 years of work, was make it so it was both easier for new people, like this French person, and more powerful for developers, which we just demonstrated. So again, thank you very much, Jenny. One of the other parts of democratization was that it's regardless of device used. So these are our current stats that show desktop being a bit more than mobile, but mobile is growing faster than almost everything else out there, and it will be where everything is in the future. So everything that's in 5.0 and Gutenberg is completely responsive. As you can see, it works at every single size.
Surprise, surprise. I think page builders do that too.
And we test on iPads and Android tablets and phones and everything. And we're also been investing into our mobile apps. This is a more invisible part of WordPress, but I think one of our most important long-term investments. In the past month, there have been over 1.3 million posts published through the mobile apps, and 3.1 million photos and videos uploaded. I'm also very excited to announce that the mobile apps are going to be getting Gutenberg in February 2019. This is everything that you just saw with this. Well, some of what you just saw will be available on mobile apps. You'll be able to navigate and manipulate blocks in the native apps, just like you could on the web. This also means that just like Gutenberg is open source and has been adapted for other CMSs and other use cases already, there will be fully open source implementations of parsing and manipulating Gutenberg blocks available for iOS and Android with beautiful open source code and available to even be embedded in other apps.
That'll be interesting. Cool. That'll be interesting.
So, to review.
Now, before I go too much further, I wanted to just make another observation in this. If you've ever listened to some of the other WordCamp speeches in the past, and like I said, I've never listened to them in complete, but the segments I listened at, there was always a lot of applause for Matt, a lot of cheering about what was happening. If you listen to this, when we go through it, you'll notice that the audience is muted, almost like nothing. He gets an occasional small laugh here. He gets a occasional bit of applause, other things here. And there's times where you can almost hear it in his voice where, you know, if you've ever gotten up and given a speech, you know when you're failing, you know when you're floundering, because the audience, you're just fighting tooth and nail to grab the audience. This is what I get the feeling from this speech. Just an observation.
WordPress exists to increase access to publishing. We had a fundamental core problem that I hope I demonstrated to you, that many parts of it that we might take for granted were too difficult to use. We started the Gutenberg project, and phase 1, I think, makes a strong progress into addressing them. We've created this new fundamental building block, the blocks I just showed you, which are a mental model you can use right now for editing posts and pages, but really across all, we want to apply it across all of WordPress. And we're going to be bringing all this to devices of the future. So I think it's a good point to say thank you.
Take the work and worry out of maintaining.
The work of Matthias, who couldn't be here, Johan, and Tammy Lister. Tammy, are you here?
Oops.
Could you please stand up since you are representing the entire team? Let's do a big round of applause. Whew. Congratulations. How does that feel to see all that stuff? I know, it's been a long road to here. I think 46, 47 major releases and iterations of Gutenberg in the wild.
Is that all? Seems like it should have been a million.
All right, this is not a finish line. This is almost a starting line for the next generation of WordPress. So we've been talking a bit about phase 2, and I'd like to re-explain some of the things that we have in mind for phase 2, since we're going to start work on it tomorrow at Contributor Day. So the next challenge of WordPress is, now that we've made kind of the stuff inside the box easier, you still have these other things on your page. So if you were to look at an average website, this is your site. Phase 1 is all that stuff in that blue box there. It's inside the post content field, is one way to think about it. Phase 2 is the rest of it. I'm going to show you a scary part of WordPress you might not have looked at in a while. Remember this screen? It's still there. This is widgets.php, a little bit old school. This is what Widgets plus Gutenberg could look like. The idea that you can bring every single block and actually manage your sidebar content areas with Gutenberg blocks. Anything you can put in your post and page, you can now put in sidebars.
Yeah, I think it's a good idea, and I think he's making a false comparison there, but it's still, it is, there's lots of things here that are promising and having it done, but it still shouldn't have been shoved into core. It should have been left as a plugin for people to opt into for what they wanted to do. And they could have fixed the core software and brought this in. That's one of the biggest complaints the community has had.
Because they're fully responsive, the interface adapts, and the block should fully adapt. This is what that could look like in the customizer. You can have blocks and content. We've converted widgets and elements into blocks. We will convert widgets and elements into blocks. And this will now, we will eliminate one additional thing that people, when learning WordPress, have to figure it out. Because, you know, probably things we'll show next year is someone saying, well, we won't need to do it because it will be done by next year. But I imagine people are starting to get support requests that say, hey, why can't I put this widget into my post? And why can't I put these cool blocks in my post into my widget areas? The other nice thing about bringing along widgets is it brings along really the past decade of WordPress themes that all already support widget content areas.
Oh, that's how you're trying to save them.
This is
but
about to show you something
that
else
doesn't
that
seem
you
to
might not
work.
have seen in a while.
What's that?
Remember menus? This
Well,
we're gonna need
we
a little
all
bit
know
of
menus
experimentation,
have
but
always
you could
kinda
definitely
sucked.
imagine a way of editing menus inline, or that we could create a different interface where there's sort of a restricted number of blocks that you could then arrange into a different menu.
So I'm not even entirely certain about what he's talking about there. I mean, menus are menus. You create them, you tweak them a little. You don't go back to them a whole hell of a lot once you set them. I mean, that's like a minor area in my personal viewpoint.
And perhaps even preview live on the front as you're doing so. Basically, a simple way to imagine this, and actually one of the full projects that'll be going for 5.1, is taking everything you can currently do in menus and putting that inside a block. So that what we call navigation menus today, by the way, we're also going to try to rename it because menus is confusing for restaurants.
Oh,
They're like, oh yeah.
that's sad, Matt. That comment there, and you really tried to make a joke, and it fell flat. That was worse than an egg dropped off a 5-story building. But come on, seriously? Menus confused with restaurants? I mean, come on. Everyone understands what a menu is. What else would you call it? I don't know. I might have to back that up for a second. Let's see if he actually has a name for it.
Wait, how many menus do I need? Lunch, dinner, what else? We're going to bring that all over. So,
okay, so he's like, well, how many menus are there? Lunch, day. See, that's the thing. What menus? No. See, you've got it confused, Matt. It's really a dumb thing, that one, personally.
phase 1 is done. We've got the fundamental building blocks for writing and editing. Phase 2 is thinking outside of post content. The focus of phase 2 is really about customization. We need to upgrade themes, widgets, and menus. And if you want to test this out before the new versions of WordPress come out, we're going to be re-experimenting with all this in the Gutenberg plugin, just like we did during phase 1. So if you have upgraded to 5.0 and Gutenberg was deactivated for you, consider reactivating that plugin, and you will get the latest.
Look at that. Bringing back the plugins so they can do the other stuff.
We've
could have kept it all in a plugin.
Phase 2 about a year now. I have publicly promised that I am going to reveal what I think phases 3 and phases 4 could be right here in front of you all today.
All right, gird your loins.
Any guesses? Just out of curiosity. Well, what's that? Emoji?
Oh, God.
That's
Seriously?
all phases.
Yeah,
So
it's good
we've
for a
been looking
giggle.
lot, again, I think if you ever never know where to go with software, it's always great to go back to users and listen to what they're doing, listen to what they're struggling with, and also to look in the ecosystem. What are people
It'd be nice if you were actually listening to the users when you go back to them.
installing plugins for? What are they sort of working around? One of the areas that I think is really key for that, and a place we can start to explore using the new fundamental building blocks of Gutenberg and the developmental framework that allows, is collaboration, multi-user editing, and workflows.
Okay, now this one here, the first time I saw it, I was completely, what is he talking about here? He does sort of explain it a little bit further, and we'll let him explain it, and then we'll jump back in here.
The 3 areas right now, I'll be actually 100% honest. One of the reasons the copy and paste from Gutenberg, from Google Docs to Gutenberg is so good, is that when I'm writing a post that I'm going to get reviewed and collaborate on with a bunch of people, Google Docs is better for that. But if we can integrate these workflows directly into WordPress, we can integrate with them with user systems, we can integrate them with revisions, and we can allow them to be fully extensible in a way that a SaaS service like a Google Docs will never, ever be. So that's an idea for phase 3, and you might notice that this is listed as 2020.
Okay, that just doesn't sound like something that everyone needs. I mean, there's a small segment of the users that use it would need something like that, but the vast majority of users out there are the ones that are independent, 1 or 2 people, each one doing separate segments on a site. There's not a lot of collaboration going on. There's bits and pieces, yeah, but I don't know. I question that one, whether that's of value at all.
I should also clarify that phase 1 and phase 1 and 2, that makes more sense, are not done. Everyone is not leaving the editor.
Okay, they're not done, and yet you forced it into core. Nice work.
And moving away from the things inside of post content. There's a lot more work to do there. And in fact, the next sort of minor update to WordPress enhancement release will have lots of improvements in performance and everything. So we're going to keep working on the core Gutenberg. We can now build some more things on top of it. There's already been some demos using things like WebRTC to allow real-time co-editing. You can do per-block locking for collaboration. It's some really exciting stuff that blocks allow you to do. The other exciting thing about this is as you are able to use blocks to lay out your entire website, bringing that workflow, approval, statuses, and revisions to the entirety of your site design is something that right now is really only available for folks using source control. Phase 4 gets a little murkier, but you might remember earlier I said that part of democratizing is doing things regardless of language. So one thing I think it's important for us to address in WordPress is an official way for multilingual sites.
I thought we had an official way for that.
This is something that I get asked every single year whenever I do a WordCamp in Quebec or anything in Europe. And I'm very excited that now we can say we have an idea for when and how and where we're going to do it. Core is now open. So we basically froze all new features coming into WordPress Core to get all the focus and all the effort on Gutenberg. Now that it's open, I think there's a few different areas that we can sort of subdivide what I just described into that can be projects with individual leaders and individual teams. These are a few of them. Don't worry about writing all this down. It will be a post on the make/core P2 any second now.
Okay, so they're back to opening core and they're going to be working on the following items. Let's see what he's got.
And that is where we'll be able to discuss it. The one thing I will highlight, though, is auto updates, optional auto updates for plugins, themes, and major versions of WordPress.
Really? It's going to be optional now. You're going to put in a little switch toggle. We won't have to use a plugin to turn off all the updates. About bloody time.
I think we're ready for this now. We need a block directory that sort of makes it easy to discover. And I would like to have actually in.
That's kind of an interesting thing there. And of course, being a show that focuses on WordPress plugins, the block directory is something that I've added to my show and will be coming up in the next couple of weeks. I even got a new domain, WP Blocks from A to Z, or WPBlocksA to Z.com. So I don't think this is going to kill the WordPress community, but I think it's going to put a serious dent in that.
Installation and activation of blocks when you're inside of Gutenberg. And finally, we need to do a lot of triage and work. We have over 6,500 open issues in our core track right now. There have been some requests like moving to a different bug tracker or things like that. I would feel bad about doing that before we cleaned up some of our home first. So that is some of what's coming.
Oh, good.
Other things that we have in mind that maybe a few of you have asked about before, but who would like us to raise our minimum version of PHP?
Notice that gets a fair decent amount of applause and hoops and hollers, you know. Raise the minimum PHP. It's way overdue, considering that the PHP 5.6 is now officially dead, and PHP 7 at the end of December this year is they stop supporting PHP 7, whereas 7.1 will be the minimum PHP being supported by PHP. So everything previous to that is like, you really got to move forward. As much as I hated jumping from 5.6 to 7 because I had a lot of plugins at the time that weren't compatible, that's all better.
Look on the Make Core P2 post. There's an amazing post from Gary now proposing that we move to PHP 5.6 in April 2019. And by this time
wait a minute,
year,
5.6.
PHP 7 be the minimum version for building.
Okay. Now, there's something wrong with that. As I just said, PHP 5.6 has been abandoned. All right. And it's not going to be until December of 2019 that PHP 7 is made the minimum. Are they still disconnected? Yeah, this is one of the problems.
Things on top of WordPress. It's kind of funny. Things like 8,000 commits worth of work, and I got a little bit of applause. Changing a minimum version number, people go wild.
Absolutely. Something useful of everything you've said so far.
I would like to say thank you in a Marie Kondo way. Thank you for the service, version 4.9. I thought it was our longest release of WordPress ever, but actually it came in 1 day shy of version 2.0 to 2.1, the cycle. There were over 173 million downloads of the 4.9 branch, and we got up to 68.4% of all the known WordPresses in the world running the 4.9 branch. This is amazing, and I would like to thank 4.9, so please join me. It was a hearty release. We also slipped a lot in there. So since we had this kind of longer period where we weren't shipping major versions, we actually put some really cool things like widget updates, enhancements to the code editor, everyone's favorite, the months of GDPR work.
Oh, God, GDPR.
And a very successful try Gutenberg callout, which was
only because you have access to the core that you could shove that in there to force it down people's throats or to enhance and encourage people to use it. How come other plugins don't get that advantage? Always the question. Why?
Part of what led to Gutenberg being so widely adopted and tested prior to the release. It's actually the best tested code we've ever merged into WordPress. Gutenberg callout, which was part of what led to Gutenberg being so widely adopted and tested prior to the release. It's actually the best tested code we've ever merged into WordPress.
Yeah, sure it is. I think there's been other code tested very, very well. This may have been more tested, but only because you messed with a lot of people.
The other exciting thing, and I don't know if you noticed this, but released WordPress 5.0. This was a release date that was discussed perhaps more than many others that have been in WordPress history.
Oh, yeah.
It was a little bit controversial putting it out on the 6th. So we released on
a little bit controversial, more like, what the hell are you doing? Fortunately, I've been fortunate. I had locked down every one of my clients from updating it, so none of my clients could accidentally update it and ruin my December with massive repairs. But I've been reading an article here or two that some people just haven't been quite as lucky, so we shall see.
December 6th, which was Thursday, a few days ago.
Although I think December 7th would have been a much more appropriate day for dropping this bomb.
The software is ready. We put it through the testings. We were a bit worried about doing it before WordCamp, so there was some very good discussion about should we do it after this event. But like I said, the vast majority of the WordPress world actually isn't here, and we collectively, some of their needs outweigh the needs of us here in this room. But I was also kind of curious because we had a number of plugins that were sort of telling people to hold off on upgrading to WordPress 5.0 or to wait until January or until the point update. So we had a kind of nice A/B test in that version 4.7 of WordPress was actually released on an identical December 6th in 2016. And so looking on the second day after the release, we had about 2.2 million installs of WordPress 4.7.
Okay, personally, I think this is an unfair comparison in that 4.7 was highly anticipated. Everyone wanted it. And there wasn't nearly as large an install base for 4.7. Now, I can't remember when was 4.7 released. WordPress release dates. WordPress release dates. Release history. Let's see. WordPress versions. History. 4.7. When was it released? That's not going to tell me. I really want that one. Okay, there it is. Here's a list of it. 4.7 was released. Wow, we had a lot of versions of WordPress. 4.7, 216, so 2 years ago. So there's been a massive increase. And 2 years ago, I believe WordPress was only 25% of the market. Now it's 32.5%. That's millions and millions more sites. So I don't think this is a fair comparison. But we'll let you take it, Matt.
For WordPress 5.0, we already have 2.3 million installs. This is as of day 2. This is continuing to grow. So I think there are rightly some people who want to wait for a future version of Gutenberg or want to for the holiday season, which is totally fine. They can delay their release. But we're seeing that the kind of early adoption numbers are very similar. It's also worth noting that because it came out on a Thursday, many of the hosts have not started their auto updates because many managed WordPress hosts will actually update your WordPress for you.
Now, that's a good point. I've actually been catching notifications from some of my newsletters is that they managed hosts and hosts like SiteGround, GoDaddy, and others that do auto updates on your WordPress site, whether you want them to or not, unless you get in there and hard code it to not to. They're going to start doing that in the next week or so. And these are going to be the small people, the ones that have set up their site. They've done it all themselves. They have minimal amount of knowledge, et cetera, and they're not going to know what hit them when they suddenly log into their site and it is Gutenberg, whether they wanted it or not. So I'm really curious to see how the spike in support is going to happen when that occurs. So that's supposed to be occurring this week. So this is going to be an interesting time.
Don't have to click a button or do anything. So this is, to my knowledge, for all the major WordPress hosts, just people clicking the button within a WordPress dashboard. So actually pretty cool. And the support loads and the feedbacks and the support forums and everything have been pretty smooth. I was even very excited that you shared in the core editor channel the other day that the support loads they see for people upgrading to 5.0 are about the same as what they've seen before. 5.0 also has an interesting effect on the Gutenberg plugin. Because 5.0 deactivates Gutenberg and you can choose to reactivate it, we've had about 162,000 of the testers of the Gutenberg plugin deactivate it. Of course, part of the making this big a change.
Okay, now this one here is kind of confusing. Gutenberg plugin installed, deactivated, Classic Editor installs. You can see there's a big difference between the number of people installing Classic Editor and keeping it there.
And part of what we started promoting over the summer, in addition to Gutenberg, was a Classic Editor plugin. Because we want people to be able to install something, a plugin we created actually called the Classic Editor, and we've committed to supporting to the end of 2020.
Notice how he's like, we created that because we're so kind and, doing such a good job here that we created that so that we can protect you plebes from yourselves.
So a few years. They could install that, and then whenever they auto-updated or clicked the button to update to 5.0, they would keep the old editor, and nothing would change for them, besides the version number, perhaps some other ancillary benefits that have gone into WordPress 5.0. So we were hoping to remove the fear that people had. It's also probably a good way to track people opting out. We promote the Classic Editor in the post-upgrade screen for WordPress 5.0, so pretty prominently for anyone who prefers the old editor or uses integration or a plugin or assistive technology or anything.
I'll give them credit for that. They did make it very prominent in coming up to it to say, hey, here, click here if you want Gutenberg, click here if you want the Classic Editor. I do give them credit for that. That was something that was decently done to help protect people, but not everyone looks at that stuff. And many people don't even read it. I've got clients, they log into their site and they never even look at the dashboard. They just go right to what they're going to do.
That might work better with the old editor. They can see it. And actually, since 5.0, we've seen the Classic Editor go up by 124,000 installs. So,
now that didn't tell you anything. Since Gutenberg came out, the Classic Editor installs increased by 125,000. That means 125,000 more people went, wait a minute, get that Classic Editor in there and turn Gutenberg off for me.
That was 2018, and yeah, all that happens. Thank you. I would drop the mic, but it's on a thing.
There's no point for the mic drop. That absolute silence in the room was your mic drop. They're like, yeah, that happened. We think you screwed up. And then notice the applause afterward is kind of like, oh, wait, we're supposed to applaud. Clap, 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 clap.
There's a saying I love, like, either you win or you learn.
Well,
I also learned a lot.
No shit, you learned a lot because you didn't really win much.
I want to highlight a few lessons that I'm personally taking away from this entire cycle.
Let's hope they're useful.
First is that we need the various teams across WordPress working together better.
Really? How about communication for a good start?
I don't think it makes sense to have entirely separate meetings and everything for PHP and accessibility and privacy and all these different things. This should be a part of every single feature and everything that we develop from the very beginning. So whatever core is, those elements should be integrated from day one. We still need to keep learning JavaScript even more deeply, as was perhaps demonstrated by the show of hands a little bit earlier. People's ability to participate in this new generation of WordPress is limited by JavaScript knowledge. I feel that is one of our biggest gating factors. I think that we need to continue to do every single, probably even move to where we have more JavaScript talks at WordCamps than PHP talks, where we're doing more tutorials, more workshops, getting more of the new generation of WordPress books that are written about WordPress 5.0 and above. I think should teach people the basics of JavaScript so they can learn the syntax and learn that it's not that scary. And start to promote more tools, amazing tools like Ahmed's, that actually show how easy it is to create blocks. We learned the tough way the importance of triage and code freezes. As you might have noticed, we missed the date, originally scheduled date for WordPress 5.0, and that was due to the best of intentions. We merged some code that was trying to fix an edge case, a small bug, and that merged and caused a regression. There were some people updated to one of the betas that actually got a white screen on the editor from a JavaScript error. Really bad experience. We fixed it within hours, but it really shook people's trust in the 5.0 release process, and that's why we had to delay it for a few weeks. We did not rush it, though. As I pointed out on one of the threads, actually our distance from 5.0 release candidate to 5.0 release was exactly 2 weeks, which is exactly the average of the previous few releases distance from release candidate to release date.
He's true there. I've noticed that in the past between release candidate and final release, always somewhere between a week to 2 weeks time. But that they lost trust, oh, absolutely. But what they were hoping and trusting is when you had said in the past that if you missed the release date, you weren't going to push it into the holidays. You were going to push it into the new year, which you didn't do. You needed this to show up in time for WordCamp so that you could talk about it, probably because you'd written a speech already. And you needed it to show up so that your investors who are invested in Automatic would understand that you have something that is going to be competing against all of the other site builders, sites out there that have been cutting into your market share over at WordPress.com. So that's my viewpoint upon that.
But another mistake that I'll take extra personal responsibility for was we were scared to announce a new release date after we missed our previous one. And that created a lot of sort of fear and uncertainty where I was trying to give like symbols, signs that, we did this release candidate. That means WordPress is coming out really, really soon. But we never talked about the average date between release candidate and a normal release until we announced our new date, which was a few days before the 6th. So I completely understand where the date seemed to come out of the blue and was very stressful for people.
Mm-hmm.
Some of the more positive things we learned were that the betas were more tested than any other releases. We've talked about feature plugins and things like that before. Not many people know this, but for betas and release candidates of core WordPress versions, we usually have under 10,000 and usually under 5,000 active sites using them. So having 600,000-700,000 sites running the Gutenberg plugin was over 100 times improvement in the number of testers that were happening before release. Part of the reason.
The one question I've got, he always talks about testing the code, 700,000 sites testing the code. Are all these sites reporting back anonymously on their errors or problems? I don't recall. I never installed the Gutenberg plugin, so I don't know if you opted in to send anonymous data back. If that's not being the case, were all 700,000 of these on separate websites, so 700,000 people, or was it, say, 100,000 people with 1,000 sites each? It's like, what's the mix of people versus plugin using, and how did they get the data? Was it self-reported? Was it reported on forums? The stuff reported on forums are only the most active developers I know go into the forum areas, mainly because they're rather brutal areas to show in. It's like going into Twitter or Facebook and saying something controversial. I mean, every time I go into support forums in WordPress.com or WordPress.org to look up things and I see the snide remarks made by the administrators there, I just like, really? It's just, you don't want to be there unless you're got a thick skin. And this is the one curiosity. Okay, tested how? What were the stuff around the testing? What were the reporting, et cetera, et cetera? So we'll have to take it at face value, though, and see what he has to say.
Gutenberg was able to become so much more robust prior to going out in 5.0. And finally, open source is amazing, and open source is difficult to develop in public.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
We had a lot of struggles here. Gutenberg happened entirely in the public eye. You can go back all the way to the beginning. You can see the change sets. You can see the arguments. You can also see the people reviewing versions from a year ago and giving it 1 stars, which isn't necessarily bad. You can see people essentially using our review system on the plugin directory to vote against Gutenberg coming into core, which is fine, but
and they didn't just use it to vote against it coming into core. If you go look at the Gutenberg plugin now, you can see hundreds, maybe even a few thousand people in there commenting upon what they think of Gutenberg since it launched. That's actually interesting. I'll bring that up in a bit.
It's not necessarily reviewing the plugin. It's more sort of expressing what they thought the future of WordPress should be. That perhaps we need a different medium or way for people to go to. So that is, I think, just something we have to keep in mind as we move forward. A lot of people who've come up to me so far at this WordCamp have said, 5.0 seemed like it was going to be terrible, and post the release, it's been pretty quiet. Or they seem to be like, this was one of the most controversial or most acrimonious release processes that we've had in a long time, maybe ever, if you're new to WordPress.
It has been ever. Bad, it's definitely ever, Matt. There's been nothing more controversial than this. And I've been with WordPress for 8 years now. 9 years. 9 years now. I've been with WordPress for 9 years, going on 10 years. I started working with WordPress 2 months before my youngest son was born. He turns 10 soon. That's how I keep track of it. So, yeah, this has been the most controversial thing you have ever done with it. Other things, they were a bit controversial. People weren't really ready for them, but they're like, yeah, okay, we want that feature. This feature here, people on the massive did not want stuffed into core. They liked the feature. They liked the idea. They liked it as a plugin, but not stuffed into core, mandated upon everyone. That's why it was so controversial, in case you hadn't figured it out. Not that you'll ever listen to this, but that's my point.
I blame Twitter partially. You can blame...
No, you can blame Twitter for everything.
Almost everything on Twitter. Between Twitter and Facebook, we have all the world's problems. But I also think that it was part of the result of some of this development and some of the warts and some of the debates and some of the sort of open source product. For a normal company, all this would happen behind the scenes or not at all. For us, we have all of this happening in public, and it's all archived and linkable and version controlled and everything. So we just have to keep in mind that, well, in addition to trying to treat each other well and have good etiquette and really converse in a productive way for whatever we're doing, keep in mind that things might appear worse than they actually are.
Maybe.
Because the conversations and the things happening on Twitter or in the blog post or whatever else might not actually be representative of the basics or fundamentals or first principles of the software.
Okay, that being said, Matt, I'm going to bring over, I went and looked it up. I've got the Gutenberg plugin here, and this will bring up just in the last from 2 hours ago to 16 hours ago, pure 1 stars, revert it back, should not be in default, horrible, should be optional, poor design, poor interface. I could give a 0, I would. Gutenberg is absolute garbage. Goes through this. I think I saw 1 3-star if I were a developer. Don't know what they've got there. And I saw 1 2-star here, and it just says buggy. So this is what people have to say currently about the Gutenberg install. And of course, they're using the plugin as a place to do it. 1 star, 1,128 reviews at 1 star. I think when I was checked it the other day, there was less than 1,000 in there. So they've already accumulated a couple of hundred in the last over this last weekend. So this is what people think, Matt. And you, unfortunately, don't seem to want to give them that thought. And I'm willing to bet they're not just a vocal minority. I mean, look at me. I'm a person who normally doesn't get out there and jump up and down. And I am.
Finally, one exciting thing that didn't really fit, but I just wanted to show y'all because I think it's pretty cool, is this year sites using SSL, WordPress sites using SSL, actually crossed over to non-SSL sites.
Woohoo! You notice people get an applause there, but you know what's funny about that is that's inevitable. I mean, with the changes in all of the browsers, that if you hit a non-SSL site, you get this warning that says this site is insecure. Well, people were forced to do it. Plus, the other thing that made it possible is the vast majority of hosting providers out there, such as myself. I'm a hosting provider. I have my own servers, and I provide hosting to a couple hundred clients, maybe a few hundred clients. They get free SSL certificates. One of the only hosts I know that still doesn't give you free ones is GoDaddy, unless they've changed since the last client I moved off of there. And there's a few others that charge for that SSL certificate still, even though free certificates are a piece of cake to have automatically installed on every website. It's like a no-brainer now. So that was like an automatic thing, Matt. That's a no-brainer. It's nice that you can, say, hey, look at WordPress. It's so cool. We've now got over 50% are SSL'd. Yeah, okay. At least you got some applause for it.
I'm very proud that we were one of the earliest supporters and adopters of the Let's Encrypt. I'm proud of all the hosts that support WordPress that have adopted low-cost or free SSL certificates and we move people onto them. We've had, the 20% increase, that's an absolute increase. So that's going from around like a 37% to 57% in 1 year, and it looks like it's continuing. So we're approaching,
it has to.
We are seeing the possibility that when you get the right technology in the hands of people for a low cost, it can actually really change something fundamental about the web, which I find kind of beautiful. So that is kind of the WordPress updates for a little while. Now, I'm going to briefly go through some of the community stuff, because the community is, of course, part of what makes WordPress so exciting.
Okay.
At different WordCamps, we've been growing every year. We've had about 145 WordCamps in 48 countries this year,
Woohoo!
Which is wild. 45,000 tickets sold. And one of the things that I think is most exciting is the organizers. Over 1,300 organizers organized those 145 camps, and that is up 33% year over year.
Ding, ding,
2,600
magic
speakers,
number.
and also an exciting 1,100 sponsors. WordCamps are cool, but of course we know meetups are bigger. These are typically the monthly get-togethers that WordPress.
Now, before we let him finish that there, I want to make a little point here about meetups. And I do have a WordPress meetup here in Victoria, British Columbia, Canada. I do the meetup once a month, except for December, where I take the month off because it takes a lot to organize and bring them together. And I speak at almost every one, but I try to bring in as many speakers as I can to do the presentations. But if I don't have one, I do the speaking myself because I want that meetup to happen. This is a group that I've been involved with since way back in 2008 when Victoria used to host a WordCamp. We hosted a WordCamp for 4 years in a row. And the people who did the organizing of it, I got on the organizing committee 1 year and I realized I do not want to head this kind of nightmare to organize it. And of course, at that time there, the rules were getting more and more and more and more stringent. I looked into what it would take to host a WordCamp about 2 years ago when I was trying to bring my meetup group back online, and the rules involved with hosting a WordCamp now using the official WordCamp moniker are so stringent and so hard, you really got to just kowtow to them to do it. So anyway, that's an aside, but the WordPress meetups, there's another catch it to that. My WordPress meetup is not an official WordPress meetup. It's WordPress Meetup in name and by the people who come there for WordPress information and other information. But I looked at becoming part of the WordPress Meetup thing. And what I found out I had to do was I had to relinquish total control of my meetup group to WordCamp or WordPress.org, the organization before I could be included in the WordPress Meetup group. So they say 687. There's actually 688, including mine, because mine is not included in that number simply because I refuse to give up the control of my group. If I let them do it, I would not be allowed to promote my company name through that group. I would not be allowed for the speakers promoting their stuff. It would all have to be WordPress. And I just couldn't do that. So that's the thing. They put a lot of protocols and stringency around it, wrapping it up. It's one of the reasons why Victoria no longer has a WordCamp, but we have the largest social media camp in North America here every year in the spring. That group there are the ones that used to put on the WordCamp. If WordCamp had been more allowance to those guys, we would have probably the largest WordCamp meetup or WordCamp in Western Canada or on the west coast of North America, because it was a massive group. We used to be in a small city that we are. We would have over 350 people show up to WordCamp here. So, and I've got my meetup group has almost 1,200 members, of which a fair chunk are active. So that's what I'm going to do. Just wanted to say that little 2 bits about that. We'll let him carry it away, and I'll catch up with the comments, which I've lost track of.
Folks will organize, and sometimes there's even a few in a given town. We're now up to over 350,000 members of the meetup group, which is a 50% year-over-year growth. That is wild. These are a lot more people going to the 687 meetup groups all around the world. 687, that's a lot of different cities. That's a lot of different neighborhoods of cities. On the foundation side, we were able to do 12 events, which is tripling the amount that we did last year of the Do Action. So these are where WordPress and other folks get together to support charitable organizations by creating them an amazing WordPress website that is totally free. And as we talked about earlier, is something that can grow with them and doesn't lock them into anything. They were as far ranged from McAllen, Texas, which notice doesn't really have like a airport code or anything, to Bristol, Stuttgart, Germany, Beirut, Montreal, Port Harcourt. Where is NGA? Nigeria? Oh, wow. That's really cool. We had a number of open source workshops. So these are bringing folks into learning how to contribute to open source, often starting from a more basic technical level. We had these in Ghana, India, St. Lucia, and Colombia. And this year, we're proud to announce that the WordPress Foundation is able to donate and support with grants to Internet Archive, Girl Development, and Black Girls Code. We were very excited to be able to do 30,000 of grants this year. Our ability to continue to do so might be hindered in the future. So as I talked about last year, you can donate to the WordPress Foundation, and there's a little Stripe button and everything for it. Since last
This is kind of an interesting little factoid here in that, last year they gave away $30,000 that was raised. This year, since January 1 of 2018, they've raised a mere $3,445 through the WordPress Foundation to be given away. That says a lot about what people think. So it kind of indicates that, one, they're either not reaching out to people correctly, or that people are wondering, is the foundation doing any good at all? Or are they just doing the protection of the WordPress trademark and nothing else? It's kind of like, what are they up to? Really an interesting thought. Makes you kind of think, why aren't people supporting and donating to them? I know I've never seen anything to encourage me to support and donate to them for anything that they're going to do. Or it could be the organizations they're donating to. Maybe people just aren't happy with where they're spending the money. Could be that too. There's a lot that goes into that.
This year, $3,445 have been donated. That is total for the year. It's not per month, not per day. So let's give a round of applause to the 85 donors.
Yay for the donors.
Thank you.
It's applause there.
We are working on updates that will actually highlight the donors on the website. And if you have in some way benefited from WordPress and would like to support organizations and events like we just spoke about, please consider going and perhaps becoming an annual recurring donor on WordPressFoundation.org. WordPress.
Now, maybe that would be a better use of all that advertising space you take up in everyone's dashboard, is to talk about what the WordPress Foundation does to support the community and encourage donations there. I think that would be a more acceptable advertising there. Maybe you could start by removing Akismet from the base install along with Hello Dolly, since those are the first things removed every time somebody installs WordPress from scratch anyway. So, just a thought, Matt. Just a thought.
.org, by the way, different website. We finally kind of loosened and were able to ship a number of really great improvements, including a completely new About page, a completely new download page.
Woohoo! They rewrote their content.
A support page, and then of course this beautiful /Gutenberg, which actually allows you to live use the Gutenberg interface right on the landing page. I am very, very proud of all the teams that worked on this. I think, do we actually mention support? Did I go through that? Yeah, we've got the Help Hub launched on support. That's a project 3 years in the making. There's been a lot of work that's gone into making this happen. As we improve, WordPress.org is kind of like our home, our building. It's where we make the things that we make. And so any improvements we go there, I think, have great effects down the road of both making our work better, but also making it easier for new folks to get involved. Because remember, the vast majority will not come to WordCamps or even ever see this. We haven't done this before, but
I think the reason the vast majority don't go to WordCamps or see it is because they're not made as enticing. I kind of wonder, like, we, being a small city, would sell out our WordCamps, and it's like, you got to make them so that they're easily accessible to people. The biggest thing I found out with my meetups is I had to find a location for the meetup that had good parking, somewhere near a bus route, a reasonable time of day that people could give out to get out there, give them lots and lots of advance notice of when it was going to occur. It's not just the price that, it has to be kept down at $25 a day or $50 a day or whatever it is now. It's how you communicate it to people to get people out to it, and how you communicate whether or not it's not just for elite developers. You need stuff for very beginners. That was the big thing of the WordCamps in Victoria, is over half our WordCamp was focused towards people who were doing it themselves. Literally beginners, little know-how. I do that with my WordCamps. I'll have a meeting where it's focused at beginners, and then a meeting where it's focused at more advanced users. My meeting where it's focused at beginners, always twice as attended, twice the number of people attend. So something to think about there.
I'd like to pick a theme song for 2019, a theme that goes through everything. We're going to play it, but we weren't sure about the copyright.
I should have thought about this all day today, and I should have hunted down a theme song that just was doom, and all I can think of is the Empire Strikes Back anthem. That's the only thing that comes to mind for me.
So I encourage you all to check out Tighten Up by Archie Bell and the Drells. Amazing song, a lot of fun. It's actually, in the intro, they talk about how it's a little band from Houston, Texas. I'm from Houston, Texas, so I was very happy about that. Thank you, Texas. A lot of what we want and need to do in 2019 is tighten up. We've built this new foundation. We now have the foundation that we can build the next 15 years of WordPress on. We've got the JavaScript, we've got the APIs, we've got the development frameworks, we have the user interface frameworks that can scale from the simple to the complex. We've got the themes, we've got the plugins. You notice on the plugins page now, we've actually put Gutenberg ready plugins above the featured plugins. So we're really going all in on getting everything Gutenberg enabled, capitalizing on the work thus far, and starting with all haste and urgency to get to the point where you can really control your entire website with Gutenberg. But we need to also tighten up everything we do. We need better engineering management processes. I talked already about release management. We need to start to really whittle down those 6,500 issues. I do understand that open issues are not a reflection of project health, but I don't think it would be bad if we really went through and were able to triage them all, and at least know that each one had been touched, and we know whether it's a real thing, what the priority is, even if it means maybe saying some of these things we'll never do. I'd rather that be explicit than something that just kind of inferred by the abandonment or no responses on a ticket. So when you get home, or if you're listening to this online or whatever, play this song. It's pretty catchy, makes you wiggle and dance a little bit, and as you go to contribute, and as we build what is coming next, the next 15 years of WordPress, maybe try to bring that attitude and jiggle and wiggle to WordPress. And that is what we got. I would like to thank some sponsors. We got key sponsors: Bluehost, Google, WooCommerce, and Jetpack were the top sponsors for this WordCamp. I want to thank the organizers. Can we give them a round?
I noticed 2 of the 4 top sponsors. Let's back that up just backing too far.
Applause.
One more.
Maybe try to bring that attitude and jiggle and wiggle to WordPress. And that is what we got. I would like to thank some sponsors.
There we go. All right. As I was going to say there, notice WooCommerce and Jetpack, 2 of the automatics companies, were the primary sponsors for this. And then Bluehost, which they've had a relationship since way back, even though it is pretty well known how crappy Bluehost's service and hosting services is now. It's like I have removed more people from Bluehost than any other hosting provider out there. And well, I think GoDaddy takes second place for pulling a WordPress website off of. But 3 of those, Google was a surprise entry to me. I didn't even know Google took an interest in WordPress until I saw them as a sponsor in this. So that's kind of an interesting small bit in case for those that, well, most people know that WooCommerce is owned by Automatic along with Jetpack, and they have had a relationship with Bluehost going back for about 8 years. And that one there, it's unknown whether they get a cut of every referral, but I'm willing to bet they do.
Key sponsors: Bluehost, Google, WooCommerce, and Jetpack were the top sponsors for this WordCamp. I want to thank the organizers. Can we give them a round of applause?
Yay for the organizers. Notice the organizers get the largest amount of applause. Thank God for the volunteers.
I don't know about y'all, this was the smoothest WordCamp US I've ever been to. Great. Music, food, everything. And that's partly put together by over 200 volunteers. And thus concludes the state of the word.
All right,
So,
now we get into
thank you
the
very
fun
much.
stuff. Now we're going to go into the Q&A, and before we dive into the Q&A, my beer is getting a little low, and I'm going to take a 30-second break. I'll be right back. Okay. All right, now we get into some really fun stuff here. Let's go into it, Matt.
Now, because everything we do is a two-way conversation,
Yeah, sure
got a
it
little
is.
Q&A. Once again, I'm Matt Mullenweg, matt.blog, ma.tt, or you can tweet me at photomat. And now we're going to open up the floor for questions or anything that y'all might want to opine on of what we just discussed. Also a good opportunity for me to just repeat how amazed and proud I am at what we built over this past year. I also now understand why no one has touched the editor for a long time. Turned it out as a little controversial, but we did it. And now we're on the other side of it and we can talk about what's next. I think to ask, we've got some mics up here on the left and right. So if you walk up, we can begin going to things. And we'll start on the right. Why don't you say your name, where you're from? Oh, my right.
Okay.
Your name, where you're from, and then whatever you'd like to ask.
Hey, my name is John Paris. I'm from here in the U.S., South Carolina.
Maybe hold it close so it stays. Yeah.
All right. How's this? Ooh, there we go. So my name is John Paris. I'm from here in South Carolina, U.S. First off, I wanted to thank you for pushing this to happen and putting significant financial resources behind it, because I know that's been pretty huge. I was wondering, though, if you could speak to the role of themes, how this all may affect themes as phase 2 is completed.
The role of what?
Themes.
Themes, yeah.
Yeah, because, you know, historically, the 20 themes have been relatively simple, but there's a lot of themes in the ecosystem that do a lot more. And it seems like with phase 2 and beyond that, the way things are registered and managed are going to change to some degree, and how you think that may affect themes going forward.
Okay, before we let Matt answer that one there, this is one of the big questions that I've heard from time and many times. What's going to happen to the theme environment? The companies that have invested hundreds, thousands of dollars, thousands of hours, man hours, creating themes and theme builders and other things into this. What's going to happen to them? That's the first question that comes up. So obviously, you know, many people are concerned with this, especially those in that developing area. I don't develop themes, but it was still one of the first thoughts I thought. It's like, what's going to happen to themes with this? Because this is heading into a theme builder. I had this discussion on Saturday night. I talked about the stuff I had with Mayanna on her website at Blogade, and I was making mention of it, and she came down to it. I think it's a great idea that this is going to be a complete theme builder. I'm like, okay, well, that can work, but what happens to all the other poor folks out there? Anyway, we'll let Matt answer this question, and then we'll dive into that answer.
It's a good question, and thank you very much.
I love that. Just like a politician or a interviewer who really doesn't like the question. Damn, that's a good question. Okay.
Well, everything's going to change. And I think themes will be one of the places.
Notice the giggle. Okay? A little bit of a giggle in there. That's the kind of tell when people are trying to answer something they don't want to answer, or that they find it amusing to themselves what's going to occur or what they're wanting to say and they're not going to say. Interesting little tell. Take it away, Matt.
As we see this show up first. So there's no reason why old themes can't continue to work. But to show some of that maybe visual version where what you see in the theme lines up pretty closely to what you're able to edit within Gutenberg, we're going to need themes to add new support. Just like back in the day, they might have added support for editor styles or widget areas or things like that. So what we're going to create in phase 2 is a way for themes to essentially opt in to say, hey, because really all a header and footer is, or sidebars, are kind of like reusable content blocks. So here's where they are, and here's some sort of CSS and layout that shows where, if you're playing out Gutenberg, blocks and columns, where they should go. And so we're going to see, we've already got over 100 Gutenberg-ready themes, and 2019 kind of cheats a little by mostly being single column. So what you see on the back is kind of what you see on the front. Next is taking it where themes can actually register these additional areas, and you'll be able to have like a really elegant experience going from sort of the back end to the front end, and understanding what you're doing, how it affects, how it relates to things for all future themes. Now, this might mean, since all themes can be totally customizable, you can change the layouts, you can change the columns, you can change lots of things. I don't know if we need like 10 or 20,000 themes in the future.
There it is right there. It's like, I don't think we need those themes anymore because Gutenberg's going to do it all. And one of the thoughts that occurred to me, I had a discussion with somebody else, my marketing manager in particular, over this, is that if you've been around the web for a period of time, you'll remember places like GeoCities and I can't remember the other build it your site. Oh, maybe it was the precursor to Facebook, MySpace, you know, where you could do anything you want, build up anything, throw in all kinds of stuff. It's almost like we're going to go back to the late 1990s, and I ran across a website I built in 2001, and I look at it, and I've got the spinning graphics, and I'm thinking, oh my God, what was I thinking? But that was the time. It's almost like we're heading back to that. And I've heard a couple of, or not heard, but I've read a couple of comments here and there about them tripping across, well, if you want to see what it's going to look like, is go look at Wix. Look at some of the sites there where people got multiple fonts on a page, different sizes, blocks in different areas. There's no consistency. It just takes away from a lot of stuff. This is going to be interesting. And visually accessible on the front end? Ooh, hard to say. They're talking Gutenberg from the back end. I don't know. I haven't heard them say it's going to be like a front end developer such as Elementor or WP Bakery, where you can actually do it right there on the front end instead of having to pop into the back end editor itself. So that's going to be an interesting one too. But we'll let you finish, Matt, as he says. Not expecting to have, 10 to 20,000 themes anymore. We'll back that up just a little bit for it. Go ahead.
How it affects, how it relates to things for all future themes. Now, this might mean, since all themes can be totally customizable, you can change the layouts, you can change the columns, you can change lots of things. I don't know if we need like 10 or 20,000 themes in the future. We might see that start to shift to more something like where there's a lower number of themes. I don't know how many, probably still hundreds though. Because people like to write their own things and everything like that.
Only hundreds of themes.
A lot of the customization starts to move to really kind of verticals and allowing people head starts for their themes. So here's some starter content that you can modify. Here's like, if you are a Mexican restaurant, here's, the starter that puts like the images and the color scheme and like things that might be typically, something you might want if you're creating a website for that kind of business or person or anything like that. And I think that's where we're going to start to see a lot more of the kind of mass, tens of thousands of different things. And I think it's also interesting to start to think about how we could even expose and share those on WordPress.org. So keep an eye out for that as themes evolve. But I should also say, I'm not clairvoyant. So we create the frameworks, and people use them in ways never could have hoped for or imagined. And so I am also curious to see what themes are going to do next. Cool. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
That was a pretty good non-answer for the most part, aside from the little bit he slipped on in the middle there, and he did a really good job of pedaling out of that by going, I'm not clairvoyant after all. I don't know what's going to happen. He slipped out. It's like themes are almost going to become irrelevant with Gutenberg. And that, I think, is the ultimate hope. Hope is that themes become irrelevant. So themes is what brought people to the ecosphere for sure, along with plugins. And themes built up before plugins. I know when I first started my show, themes were just starting to catch hold and they were starting to bring the market, and the plugins were still 90% plus free, which has changed since then. But yeah, this is going to be an interesting time for that.
Yeah. All right, let's go over here.
All right. Hi, Matt. I'm Nick Adams from WP Buffs. Had a question about the just the transparency and the release of 5.0. There was some concern about the fact that 12 of the last 11 posts on WordPress.org/blog all came from automatic employees. And there was just some concern, it seemed, of the transparency of how conversations around the release were made. So I was just wondering about what lessons have been learned that we can all apply as those who contribute as well, about how we communicate going forward with 5.1 and beyond.
Sure. Now,
all right, so we're asking you, Matt, how come all the last bit posts were nothing but pure automatic, and how are you going to do better with your communication going forward? Let's see if we can get an answer.
Automatic does have, Automatic tries to follow Fire for the future. It's now a company of over 830 folks, which means that translates to about 40 plus full-time people working on WordPress core. It's working on WordCamps, it's working on a lot of...
Yeah, that's a fantastic thing. I really admire that you dedicate so many employees to it, and it's nice. Somebody has to foot the bill. I must admit, for everything that's getting done, somebody somewhere has to do the work. And if you don't have enough volunteers, you got to pay them. And it's easier to get paid people to do work. I know that from all the volunteer work that I do, which often gets pushed to the side just so I can do paid work to earn money. I sit on 2 boards as a director, and I don't get paid for that, but yet I still have to get work done. And they suck up anywhere from 6 to 8 hours of my week just sitting on those boards. So I understand where it all comes from. So let's see what you have to say, Matt.
Things. So being one of the larger companies, it does appear to have an outsized presence. On one nice thing, though, that we did differently this release that we've never done before is we had actually a pretty wide team of release leads. And I don't remember the exact percentage, but there were more 5.0 release leads that didn't work from automatic for Automatic than there were total release leads in prior releases. So we did have some really vigorous discussion and lots of different viewpoints addressed. The other thing that I think everyone, regardless of what company they happen to work for, tries to bring to the release process or the WordPress decision-making process really is gathering as much information as possible. And that might be objective data. I think we certainly read and I think we responded to almost every single review of Gutenberg, probably over 1,000 of them. We read Twitter, we read the blog post, we read post status, we read WP Tavern, we read the comments on YouTube. Like even
but do you take them seriously?
Don't read the YouTube
to try
comments.
to try to get as much input as possible. And that is part of the art and science. Like maybe the science is some of the data that comes in, like the numbers that are adopting the classic editor or the Gutenberg plugin. And the art is really trying to make sense of all the different things people are saying and balance that. So I would say the standard that we should hold everyone to, regardless of whether they work for Automatic. Yoast had a ton of contributors in this release, which was really impressive. I think Bluehost now has 5 full-time people on core. GoDaddy is expanding their core team. We're going to see a lot more people that are being sponsored and contributing full-time. And by definition, because they're spending a lot more hours than weeks.
And all those major corporations are not doing it out of the goodness of their heart entirely. They're doing it to see out of ways to, of course, benefit them, which I don't blame them. If I had that kind of money, I had that kind of large corporation, I would probably do the same to help influence it in a direction that helps and support my business. But the thing is you have to think as an open source software, community software, it's not completely community led, which is why the Classic Press fork has evolved. And of course, we'll see how that one goes because they have to deal with the same issue eventually. They're going to get so big and have so much happening. Somebody has to step up and take the heat. Who will that be?
Perhaps someone who's not working full-time, they're going to appear to be right there. But regardless of company affiliation, we have a way that we do things in WordPress. And that is what's really important. And I think it's great if we can, when we talk about these things, that we don't sort of attack the company, because often it's a very small percentage of the company that's even there. And the people working for it have been kind of donated by the company. They're often bringing a worldview and a set of experience, which actually usually isn't even that aligned with the commercial interest of that company. But that we talk about behaviors versus just saying, hey, contributors from X company are bad or evil or being too strong. We could say, encourage more folks to do more. I would love for like the 40 from Automatic to be a small percentage of the total people working full-time. We will get there. As more companies start to adopt 5 for the future, I think that this will appear to be less and less of a problem.
All right, thank you.
No problem. Appreciate it. Yeah, we can clap.
Yeah.
It keeps you awake, right?
Somebody hold the sign up. Applause, please.
Right over here.
Hey, Matt. So I'm Fred Meyer from WP Shout, and first I want to say thank you for your personal role in helping, move Gutenberg ahead. And I know, I mean, it can't have been especially easy to get it out the door, and I really appreciate it. And I'm really excited to see it exist. My worry about it is that in like the 2, 3, and 4 steps you mentioned, there's very little about making layout more robust in Gutenberg. So there's columns right now, but you can't do anything like margins or padding, or you can't specify how those columns work on different devices. And what I think is going to happen is, it may be the case that WordPress starts to orient itself around blocks, but all of those layout decisions that are maybe 50 or 60% of what makes a layout builder are going to be handled by the marketplace, which in general I kind of like, but it's going to kind of mean that there's a million different ways that things work in practice once again. So I'd really like to see you do as much as you can to actually define a layout language for WordPress that's a lot more robust than what Gutenberg has right now. And I'm also curious kind of how you move Gutenberg onto the front end in a way that has your participation, because once again, that's something that the marketplace is going to do. And I think right now is really an opportunity to make that as standard as it can be. So yeah, I hope that makes sense. I'm curious your thoughts on that, because I didn't see it in the 2, 3, or 4 priorities that you mentioned.
Now, that was an interesting question, in that he was asking a bit about the layout issues. And I hadn't thought about that when they're going through all this Gutenberg stuff. And then it started me thinking like, well, yeah, I've got a theme builder I use. I use Enfold for a number of things I build. It's a really great theme. And it allows me to move blocks over the top of others by going in and adjusting margins and paddings and other things. And so I can move these things around to give it a more dynamic layout to enhance content on content. And I didn't see that in the Gutenberg demonstrations or anything like that. And as he's asking there, he's also asking, how about Gutenberg on the front end? And what's going to happen with Gutenberg on the front end? So this is an interesting thing to think about, which is not there yet. So let's see what Matt has to say about it.
Thank you very much. I'm also worried about that. Like, that's important that we get right. I'm not so worried that I think we shouldn't start, but I think that it's something that we're going to start to develop. And a beauty of WordPress development is we can see what people are doing organically and then adopt and cherry pick the best of it. So I'm okay with some different things happening right now, much like...
Well, Jay, you could have done that with all the organic work that's been going on with theme developer or theme builders and other things, and you could have cherry picked that, but you didn't. You went and decided, oh, we need to build something brand new from scratch.
There's a dozen plus page builders right now that all have completely incompatible data stores and design languages and blocks and everything like that. Now they're all able to build on some of this common foundation of Gutenberg. And in the future, you could even imagine a day where you could switch between different page builders and not lose your entire content. That would be pretty exciting. But we're not there yet. I would say that these are going to...
So that's an interesting thought he just let slip out, is that while you have Gutenberg, you still have a page builder on top of it to make your content look better and look good. He sort of let that slip. I don't even think he realized what he said there. So what's the point of Gutenberg if you've got to use a page builder anyway to make the content look good? Because Gutenberg's cool?
Ripe areas. We're just getting started with phase 2. So even though I showed some mock-ups that looked high fidelity, think of those as just like the starting points. And actually, all of those mock-ups have been posted to make.core now, or make/core. make.wordpress.org/core. So I think we did post on the PHP versions, we did post on the sort of 9 areas that I talked about, and we did post of some of those phase 2 mockups. And the reason is that we want them to be a starting point for discussion. And we want that discussion to have where WordPress development always happens. So we can also be inclusive of, there's 2,000 people here, there are like a bajillion people who aren't here. So dropping on that thread would be a fantastic place to keep that discussion going.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, you really didn't answer that one very well at all, did you?
Hi. My name is Toru Miki. I flew from Tokyo, Japan to be at my first Wordcamp US.
Where did you say you're from?
Tokyo.
Tokyo, cool.
Yeah. So my question might already be covered a little bit already, but if I may, I would like to read a question I've got here. So I gave a talk yesterday reflecting on contribution to WordPress from a contributor's point of view after teaching university art students what is and how and what could mean to online self-publish. And at the end of talk, yesterday, I presented one perspective on the mission of the WordPress, Democratizing Publishing. And my question kind of jumps up from what I concluded at the end. So 15 years ago, and maybe even 13 years ago, I first started using WordPress. Mission, Democratized Publishing, to be honest, it was very vague meaning, and at least in Japanese, we had a difficult time trying to translate that just 2 words. But that was okay, I felt, because we had no other options. I think the WordPress was the only kind of software that had that kind of mission, and I felt that contributing to WordPress not only meant contributing to WordPress, but the whole web itself. But at the end of 2018, there are so many other ways to publish online. Different tools, whether you like or not, the proprietary stuff, social medias, and open source, and different technologies, and the devices, the mobile devices, has changed even how we interact our life with the web. So my first part of the question is that I would like to hear an update, or perhaps now in a little bit more details, on your thought, vision, and definition of democratized publishing, because our surrounding environment had changed so much of it since the first time they came out. And the second part of that is that I presented one perspective or the meaning of that democratized publishing yesterday, and I think everyone here has their own thought and their own meaning and their own perspective of things, which may be, I'm not sure if anyone's here is 180 degrees difference to your statement, but maybe not quite the same, look in the same directions, but slightly different thoughts, or some may overlap. How we can cope with that difference, or in a way, how could we fill that gap or bridge the gap if we want to, or how could we keep working together even if your thoughts are different? What would you request or want the community to do?
That's good questions. Let me try to address both points, but it's also really broad, so I don't know if we have the space to fully do all of that. I talked about one version of democratizing publishing. It's okay, there's probably a more expansive definition that we could talk about. It's okay if people have different ones. It's a mission, it's broad enough that it's something that we can work on the rest of our lives. And we will break it down to projects and ideas and tasks and different things like that. And that's where it gets a little more concrete, and different people can be involved in different ways. But fundamentally, we kind of want the web to be a more open place, and we kind of want more people using WordPress. Also, if you disagree with that mission, you can take all the code of WordPress and fork it, or do something else. Well, and that is not
people are doing that.
A bad thing. Gary actually has a great post on the importance of forking in open source. In terms of these other, like you said, there are a lot more places you can post now. There were a lot of places even when WordPress started. There was just most of them are gone. There was LiveJournal, there was Typepad, there was the old Vox.com, there was Diaryland. There were all these sort of Zanga. Anyone having flashbacks? There were all these
just a
places
few,
you could publish. WordPress succeeded because it was more open and more flexible, and at the time provided a better user experience. I think our mistake, really the mistake of the past decade, is we didn't do the work to create Gutenberg until 2 years ago. We didn't start it, because every time we'd start it, it got really controversial, or we'd get mired in technical details, or it was just too acrimonious. We'd be too worried about backwards compatibility or something to really take it to fruition, to where it's something that we can actually present and release to the world. So some of these other specialized services have been
more likely that the technology didn't exist, but you also, I really don't have a good response to that one. We'll let that one go. Oh, Classic Press is definitely taking off. It gained a load of new users over this last weekend. I noticed that their name has become very popular out there, Classic Press, and I've started to look at it because I have a couple of enterprise clients that I won't be able to take to Gutenberg, period. Just because of the future of Gutenberg, I have to use something like Classic Press. I hope it survives for sake of my enterprise clients.
Better interfaces, particularly for their use cases. Twitter used to be called microblogging, right? Many of them have many of these basic elements of publishing, embedding images, commenting, sorts of things. And you could actually build most of these services on a WordPress backbone. They weren't because we weren't innovative enough on the user experience. I think we're actually now leapfrogging. So we've created something that allows a lot more flexibility and more power. And because of the WordPress ecosystem, actually supports more blocks and everything like that than anyone else does, even a few days after the release. And this, I think, gives us an opportunity to recapture the web that was. And whether we do so or not, though, depends 100% on the user experiences we create.
Okay. Sorry, it's not a question, but
I'm going to bounce to the next question, just so we can.
It's not a question, it's just one request. Can I make just one request?
Sure.
Yeah. I would like to request, if I may, with all respect, to give you a homework to write this answer and publish it in your either on your personal blog or on a .org in somewhere or another. For the reason it can be translated accurately to people around the world, because it's only 50% of WordPress locales is in English.
Yeah. Oh, homework to blog, I'm happy to do. So thank you.
There you go. Blog about it, Matt. Just take your transcript from this and
my name is
copy
Victor.
and paste.
I'm from Miami, Florida. Although I identify as a Central American with a lot of close Canadian friends. But one of the things I've taken away from this particular conference and speaking with previous WordCamp Europe organizers is the idea of embracing neighboring regions and not discouraging where an event like WordCamp Europe can be hosted. And so I suppose my question is, was it perhaps a small oversight where WordCamp United States, as was sort of dictated in State of the Word, where other regions around here, which obviously you want to draw from, discourages a large area and base like Canada from hosting what would be a landmark event on this side of the world?
Yeah, so why isn't it called like WordCamp North America? Yeah. It's a little less catchy, but we'll probably do it at some point. How many Canadians do we have here, by the way? Yeah, round of applause for our Canadians. This used to be called WordCamp San Francisco, so we've expanded a little bit. The idea was to have at least one sort of major keystone event per year, where I put on a suit, present this sort of things. We can kind of, towards the end of the year, where we can kind of reflect on where we've been and where we're going. What it's called could almost be anything. It was called WordCamp San Francisco for many years, and when we started moving it around, so it wasn't in the same place, also San Francisco started to get pretty expensive, we switched it to US. I would be happy to have a WordCamp US in Montreal or Vancouver or other cities. And I believe we've even had some proposals from some other cities to host. So the next 2 years we will be in St. Louis. So those were still, maybe we'll still call them WordCamp US. But I would love for our first WordCamp US not in the United States. Perhaps we can change that name when that happens. So keep organizing and maybe do a proposal next year for hosting, I guess that would be 2021 and 2022. That's good.
Maybe a WordCamp in North American WordCamp. Yeah, they could call it WordCamp NA for no agenda. All right, that aside, it's an interesting thought that they would have WordCamp somewhere outside the U.S. for WordCamp U.S. to make it a WordCamp North America. May eventually happen. Probably will. My bet it would happen someplace like Toronto first or somewhere back eastern Canada, which would be kind of cool. Who knows, I might even go to it then if it's in Canada. Easier to get to places in Canada, cheaper than flying to the States. There you go, make it middle. Why don't they have it in Houston? After all, that's where he's from. You could do it there.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Birgit from Germany, and I'm wondering how the foundation of WordPress can expand more to support people who are investing so many time into contributions to WordPress and are not covered by business. For instance, like Heather Burns for creating more awareness about privacy, or people who are creating more accessibility. I saw Automatic is sponsoring or pledging for the WP Campus accessibility audit. But what can we do as WordPress community or the WordPress Foundation to set more funds to support such people who are not covered by companies?
So that was an interesting question, in that asking how can you get the small guy to be supported? And this is the one thing that falls through the cracks for everyone, and a lot of people don't think about, is that the small guy, someone such as me, one-man show for the most part. I have 2 employees. I have 1 contract worker. My employees aren't even full-time at the moment. is that the amount of time that goes into what I do to help support the WordPress community is stuff I do outside the community, and in essence it benefits my business at the same time, which every business that does these things, they don't do it just out of the goodness of their heart. They do it out of the goodness of their heart, but it also benefits their business, puts them out there. She's asking, how can someone do that if they don't have the resources to do it? Matt's answer, it's kind of interesting.
Good question. And definitely something we consider, many times.
You ever notice that whenever it's a question he doesn't seem to want to answer very well, almost like you hear politicians, newspaper reporters or whatever, or interviewees, it's like, that's a good question, giving them that extra 3 seconds for their brain to go, how the hell do I answer this?
Right now, the WordPress Foundation has 0 employees. So you can, actually all the filings are online. You can see.
I apply.
You apply to be employed? Oh. Well, part of the nice thing about having 0 employees is that as soon as you have 1 employee, you need HR. US, you need health insurance.
You don't need HR. I don't know about states, but Canada, you don't need HR. In Canada, you don't need HR. Well, health insurance is covered here because we have health insurance nationwide, guaranteed. But he's basically saying the moment we hire somebody, we have to do a crap load more paperwork and we have to hire more employees to cover the 1 employee. I don't blame it. It costs money.
Like it starts to actually create a lot more overhead. And the more importantly, I feel like you need like a good management structure so that people are getting the proper feedback, that they're growing, that they're contributing in a way. You kind of need that oversight that happens. One of the great donations that companies do when they devote people to work full-time is they also provide all that for those people, including the management and oversights. And I actually think it is not a bad hurdle because there are literally so many companies trying to hire people to contribute full-time to WordPress. It maybe is not a bad hurdle that if you can't get hired by any of them, maybe you're working on something that isn't a good fit. But if there is a specific area, feel free to raise it to me, because I talk to all the companies that are trying to hire lots of WordPress contributors, and they're often asking me, what do we need more of? And so lately that's been like more JavaScript, more design. Yeah, no, I actually have been saying that. Thank you, Mo. Areas where we're a little bit weaker in terms of contributors, and happy to start to put the bug in the ear for other types of things in the future, actually, as you already have done just by asking the question. So thank you.
That was a good answer, non-answer. It was a good answer in that, well, we don't want to hire anyone because we don't want to put out the income. Well, maybe you could get hired by some other company. Contact all these other companies that are hiring people to work on WordPress stuff. Maybe they'll hire you. And if they won't hire you, maybe you're just not doing anything that's important. Whatever you're doing is obviously not important enough for anyone to hire you. Really kind of sad. And then goes on to just say, well, we'll just put some bugs in the ears of people. Maybe that'll help you out. And that's really all I got to say about that. Yeah, good answer, non-answer. He really does look like he should be running for Congress, especially with that tie. God, that tie.
Hey, Matt, Adam from Colorado. You mentioned before in your talk that people were using 1-star reviews as a way of expressing their goals for the future of WordPress. And you said that perhaps there was a better avenue or...
Right. It's not their goals for the future of WordPress. It was their thoughts on what they thought about Gutenberg, not their goals for the future of WordPress.
Channel that we could develop for that. I'm curious about your ideas for what that might look like.
Whew, that's a tough one. Like, I don't know. We also had, on the 5.0 target release date announcement, I think one of our busiest P2 threads ever, like 200 plus comments, some better than others. I don't know. Like pure voting would be weird, right? Because it's not really necessarily representative. Elections would be hard, right? Choosing actual representatives in kind of like a representative democracy sort of way is hard. So I don't know, maybe we can create on BuddyPress or WordPress or something a better forum for this. We've had an ideas forum in the past, we've had a kvetch section.
Yeah, let's put it all back on BuddyPress that nobody ever reads. It's a good place to bury it. Nobody will ever see it. Complain there. We won't look.
Of WordPress.org where people can just complain. Like maybe there's like a version 2 or version 3 of some of those where we can have capture more of that, almost like petitions for various things that we want to do or prioritize. So but it doesn't exist yet. If you're excited and working on that, I'm happy to put some experiments up on WordPress.org, and so to get involved with the meta group.
Sounds good.
Thank you. No, just kidding.
Hello, I'm Morten from Planet Earth.
Stay a little closer to the mic.
Right, sorry. I wanted to talk to you about the use of the word we. So you said earlier today, we never talked about the release dates until we were absolutely sure. And previously you used the word we to refer to the people in this room. And then you used we to refer to all the people that use WordPress. And then sometimes you use we to refer to something that sounds an awfully lot like Matt Mullenweg. This is actually more of a question of leadership than it is about we. It's just, it's framed within how we use the term we. So just to give you all some context, in all the make blogs, there's this common consensus that if like the accessibility team or the themes team or any other themes post something, they post it under the moniker we because it's something that comes from the team, right? Now, in the post that came out about the release of 5.0, it said, we have decided to release da-da-da. And if you read the comments, there was a bunch of people who said, who is we? Where was this decision made? Where's the insight into all this and what's happening here? I think the community needs to have a better understanding of what leadership looks like in WordPress currently, what the vision is for leadership moving forward. But we also need some clarity in language, because this language that's being used is awfully confusing the way it is. So specifically, I actually want to know who we is who made the decision for this release. Not because I necessarily disagree with it, but because I don't know, and no one knows, because who was there, what decision was made, how did that happen, in what forum was this, where can we look at it? And secondly, I would like to hear your thoughts about who this we leadership group is and how that works, because we make decisions about the next leaders. We make decisions about when things are going to be released. We make decisions like, we're going to do Gutenberg. Who is we?
Good question.
That is actually a good question, in that he's asking, who is we? When you say we, it's like and it's made me think about how I word a lot of things when I'm talking to people. I'm a solopreneur for the most part, everything, and I say we an awful lot instead of saying I did this. And I don't know where it comes from, but it is something that made me think about how I address stuff, and it's probably going to help me correct my stuff. And it is a good question. How Matt answers this, though, it's almost like he didn't listen clearly to what the guy was saying initially and then got it. So take it away.
I mean, we is contextual, right? So you can look at the context of where it's being talked about to ascertain what it was. Sometimes we might not have done that as well. So to answer specifically your question, the we that I meant when I said we've decided on this release date was the 5.0 release leads. And where it was decided was in a channel where we were debating and talking about it. And I said an I in there as well, where I said I take responsibility for it because it was rough. And so I'll take personal responsibility and say me, or I, for holding off on announcing a new date. And then finally, my name was on the post for the date that was announced. But I don't just go in a cave and come up with these things. We tried, how am I using we here? The we is everyone who showed up to the dev chats tried to have conversations about this. And it turned out to be really, really difficult to have a conversation. And, we, WordPress, default to being very, very open, where anyone can contribute to any of our threads, any of our Slack channels, any of our weekly meetings, anything like that. One of the challenges was a lot of people were showing up who had never contributed to WordPress before, and were kind of crowding out the kind of core team's discussion and debate about where the release date could happen, or whether the software was ready, or what bugs were urgent, or things like that. So you're completely correct that I would say the changing context.
I'm going to stop it there for just a second to address that one little bit there of all the people suddenly showing up. You know, they might have just been the silent majority suddenly showing up, Matt. Did you ever consider that? So eventually your silent majority, which the majority is almost always silent. They're quiet. They're willing to accept things. They're going to go along with things until it gets to a certain point that cracks that. And all of a sudden they show up in droves to make their voices heard so that maybe you will listen to them. And basically what it sounds like you did was you just dismissed them, as you pretty much state here. So we'll back that up just a little bit.
And debate about where the release date could happen, or whether the software was ready, or what bugs were urgent, or things like that. So you're completely correct that I would say the changing context of we is one of the biggest challenges that we have in both being kind of radically open, where anyone is allowed to participate in any of these things, outside of the 5.0 release leads, which were announced and chosen. But it's also part of why we did create a private channel just for the 5.0 release leads. So we could have a conversation that was, by the way, every bit as feisty as the public one, but among people who were part of the group, meaning there wasn't any drive-by folks. I mean, could you imagine at your company if, like, just sometimes you were, like, deciding something and then random people would come in and, like, talk for 5 minutes, or, like, it's a very difficult way to develop things, and that's what I meant when I talked.
Okay, did you catch that bit? They're coming into your company, you know, and they're talking to you all of a sudden. Wait a minute. They kind of probably thought it was their company. Let's replay that little bit, just a bit, to catch that.
If, like, just sometimes you were, like, deciding something and then random people would come in and, like, talk for 5 minutes, or, like, it's a very difficult way to develop things, and that's what I meant when I talked about open source is amazing. Open source is hard to develop in public. I'm okay with this trade-off, meaning that sometimes we might default to doing things in the open, or debating them on Slack channels or in P2 posts or some things like that, but ultimately we need to make a decision. And that decision...
Well, I'll grant you that. Ultimately, a decision has to be made, and you've got to make the decision, good, bad, or ugly. You know, I admire the fact that you owned the decision, Matt. At least you owned it and didn't pass off the buck. So good for you on that. Doesn't make us any happier, but good for you for owning it and doing it no matter what the fallout was. So nice work on that. Got to give you credit.
Will not reflect or be agreed with everyone who participated in the discussion, but as much as possible, we should have those people heard and that they had an input into it, even if the outcome is not what they would have liked. And I think something we can always continually improve on is helping people feel like they were heard and understood in it. And, you know, the instance that I did a lot of work in the weeks leading up to the 5.0 release, trying to listen and hear and understand as many people as possible. Those were definitely inputs that led to the decision that the software is ready. In addition to more objective things like how many bugs are open, what's the severity of them, does anyone really care about responsive images? That was just for you.
Yeah, sure.
So that is, but feel free to ask. I didn't actually see the comments that asked who the we were in the P2 thread. I did respond to like 24 others, but I must have missed those. But you can always ask, and I'm happy to clarify. And if English is not your first language as well, I completely understand where things might be confusing as you go through.
You see, that was where it sounded like he didn't quite understand the question. Of course, it created a big hubbub when he made that statement there. Talking to a fellow who obviously spoke English fairly well. I believe he said he was from Germany, but he still spoke English quite well. So it's not matter whether or not his first language or not, he still understood it well enough. So yeah, it did make a bit of a hubbub, and Matt apologized for it, and those two made up on Facebook and Twitter and other places where I saw the conversation flow. But anyway, we'll let that one carry through.
I must have missed those. But you can always ask, and I'm happy to clarify. And if English is not your first language as well, I completely understand where things might be confusing as you go through. So, thank you.
Can I just add a comment to that?
Sure.
You do realize what you're describing is a governance structure designed without governance, right?
If only there were a meetup for that.
Thank you very much.
Oh, that comment was just cold. It really was. If only there were a meetup for that, a governance structure without government. Ah, man, I couldn't believe that. It's just like, really? You had to do that? Okay. A couple more comments. We're just about through this. Thank you, everyone, or the couple of you that have hung out the entire time. Really impressed that you've stuck with me on this.
Hi, Matt. My name's Andrew Taylor. I'm from Portland, Oregon. I'm on the hosting team, and I know release date was big for a lot of folks, but you mentioned that this was the longest release, almost by like 1 day between releases.
Between major versions, yeah.
Between major versions, and Gutenberg has had a kind of release to it every 2 weeks. So I was wondering, you mentioned also that if you look at RC history, you could kind of infer that this date was coming. Can you be more direct about release cadence in the future? I know there's been talk of a fast follow, but when can we expect that? And can we expect another 2-year gap, or is the cadence going to be tighter in the future?
Good question.
Good question.
Let me tell you about my dreams, because this is what I think about. I would love to get to the point where you're not thinking about what version of WordPress you're on. You're essentially choosing a channel. Like, give me the code that's super baked. And
okay. Did you catch that little bit there? What he's envisioning is Chrome, Windows 10. I'm trying to think of the other pieces of software, Adobe software if you're using the cloud, where updates are just automatic. You don't even see them. They just happen. And hopefully they don't break your shit, which, well, Chrome does a pretty good job. Windows, not so much. I have updates blocked on my computer simply so that I don't have an accidental update that breaks me again. Same with the Adobe stuff. I've got the updates blocked. Everything, I've got all the updates blocked, because while they might go 1, 2, 3, 5, 10 updates with no problem, they'll put out one that all of a sudden breaks everything and you can't get anything done. So that's what it sounds like he's envisioning here. Continue it.
Stable. Let me be a little riskier and run beta stuff. And then for the folks actually involved in development.
Oh, and as he says, have a channel. Well, that one there falls along the lines of WHM cPanel. As a web host provider, I have WHM software running on all my servers, which provides the cPanel for all my clients. And I have 3 channels to choose from there. I have the stable version, which is the version previous to what they've released. It's because it's stable, it doesn't work, it always works, no problem. You can go to the current version, which is mostly stable, seems to work well, and then you can go to the bleeding edge version. And the bleeding edge version is you're running a risk of breaking the stuff on your clients, for your clients. If it's for yourself, you might do it, but when you got clients to depend on you, it's risky to run anything but a version that is 100% stable and working. And that way it never upgrades until they've gone through a couple of iterations of what they call current, until it's stable again. Because that's the nature of software. They do updates, somebody misses a comma or a period somewhere, and poof, it breaks. So that's what he's envisioning here. I'm going to back that up just a little bit so that we can get that fully without me interrupting.
Let me tell you about my dreams, because this is what I think about. I would love to get to the point where you're not thinking about what version of WordPress you're on. You're essentially choosing a channel. Like, give me the code that's super baked and stable. Let me be a little riskier and run beta stuff. And then for the folks actually involved in development, like, let me run today's version of the code that's probably been tested by only a handful of people. This is very similar to like the Canary channel on Chrome, or there's other large software used by actually far more people than WordPress that follow this kind of thing. In terms of future minor releases to WordPress, we are hoping to get out a kind of minor bug and enhancement release to 5.0 before the end of the year. So that probably means in the next 2 or 3 weeks.
And before we continue that, another thought, this contradicts something he said back in the original speech that said they're looking at something such as being able to turn off auto updates of everything. So this is a bit of a contradiction there. But maybe they can have something like that. They can flow together. Both of those could work together. It's in essence, it's not a bad idea. It's just challenging.
That will be, think of the plus 0.0.1 version of 5.0. There's just a lot of things that, because we froze the code, they're fixed, they're ready to go, they're nice enhancements. We got some performance increases as well, but we were freezing the prior code to get the rest done. What I would really like to move to, I don't know if 2 weeks is possible, though I think it's good to aspire to, is where every time there's essentially such a regular cadence that we can launch, essentially start development on the next sprint, or 2-week sprint, and freeze the previous one. So that sort of branches into an RC that goes out to everyone who wants to test it, people who are on more of the beta or stable channel, and then a week later, we can release it to the world. So when we get to that more regular cadence, I think it's going to be better for all users of WordPress. So that's the minor releases, major releases. I think that covered it, right? Did I miss anything?
No, I think that's pretty good. Thank you.
No problem. Thank you. And let's start wrapping up here. So last questions. Last couple.
Hey, Matt.
Howdy.
Michael Bissett of SoFly. You piqued my interest earlier about the idea of having native multilingual functionality in WordPress. Today, we've got players like WPML, Polylang, the fellows at Multipress. Hi. They're back there in the green shirts. But I'm wondering, granted, it's planned for 2020 plus, so maybe there's not that big of a sketch yet. But I'm curious, what's this going to look like from a functional standpoint?
And also, what does it look like in a post-block world? So the blocks perhaps provide a different layer of granularity or control that you might want to branch out a site written in one language into other languages. I don't know, and I actually don't want to sort of prescribe any particular technical direction, because we just need to do some experiments and see what works best there. There's been promising work around multi-site, so where each kind of language is its own site, and then you have something running to kind of synchronize them or show like what's built in one language and not the other. You could also do similar things by sending permissions and custom post types and all sorts of other ways you can kind of skin that cat. And I don't know exactly what's going to be right there. I kind of want us to get more of the customization out of the way for us, because I think it's really interesting if you truly internationalize a site. Maybe you're not just translating the words, but actually translating the layout, translating the images, translating all parts of the site in ways that today might express themselves as a different theme, but in the future, we could have some sort of workflow, collaboration workflow attached to that is completely driven through the WordPress interface, which I would find pretty exciting. So don't worry, there's nothing that's been decided there. There's no we that has decided something. It's just something that I want people to start thinking about. I want us to start discussing it and debating it, and kind of aim for that once we get some of this stuff out of the way and in a really good place where we're not seeing testimonials and quotes and user tests like we saw earlier, that this is probably one of the next big things we need to address with WordPress.
All right, thank you.
Cool. All right, we'll do one more, and then you can be the last one. All right, so next to last.
Hi, my name is Dmitry. I'm the founder of a theme shop called Theme Patio, and also lead organizer of WordCamp Moscow twice. My question is, for quite a long time, there was this notion that theme is responsible for visual representation of the website, and plugin is for adding functionality and more complex stuff like that. Now, after the release of WordPress 5.0, we have basically a theme is responsible for basic styling, adding CSS, maybe some basic JavaScript, and nothing more. And people start releasing plugins that add blocks, which is fun. And you also mentioned that in one of the next phases, you may want to introduce a repository for blogs. So can you elaborate on that? Do you see that happening, and how fast, and what should happen with plugins that already introduce new blogs, and how do you see that? Yeah.
That's a good question there,
well,
actually.
We're gonna see, right? I think that a lot of the effort that currently goes into making themes can go into making blocks, combinations of blocks, pre-made layouts, kind of these configurations, essentially. A future version of what I showed with that import and export of JSON.
See, that's the one thing I'm going to let him finish in a moment, but that's the one thing that's of interest there, is that he is talking about blocks being a future item without saying it, it's almost like blocks are going to replace what themes used to do, in that the blocks will be pre-made, the code in them with pre-filled content, etc., etc. So it's going to be an interesting thing, and blocks could be something that's up and coming the way plugins were 10 years ago. So this is an interesting aspect to the WordPress ecosystem.
I think is like the first bits of what is going to become really what is exciting for people building their WordPresses in the future. I also think that it'd be nice to have a clean, well-lit place for everyone to find these, just like the plugin and theme directories aspire to be today. And I would love for there to be essentially parallel to the plugin directory, a block directory, and then parallel to themes, kind of a layout builder type thing, so you can choose different stuff. But I don't know what that exactly is going to work like.
Well, I didn't catch that one before. He's talking about another area for a layout builder directory versus a block directory and a plugin directory. So he's looking at another directory. That's interesting. That's definitely an interesting component.
So plugin directory, a block directory, and then parallel to themes, kind of a layout builder type thing, so you can choose different stuff. But I don't know what that exactly is going to work like. And in the meantime, it's going to be a little wild west of different plugins themes. I do encourage any blocks being registered to be in a plugin, so please don't do that in themes. And that might even be an official guideline. But what's cool about that is it then allows more portability across themes and more of that kind of design happening in a way that also is more portable. It's probably the best way to put it.
Yeah, so you do see it as like a different entity in terms of themes, collection of blocks, and plugins in future.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Cool, thank you. And thank you for organizing Wordcamp Moscow. It's one of the places I want to make it out to. All right, shutting it down.
Hi, Matt. My name is Christy Chirinos, and I am one of the co-owners of Caldera WP. We make Caldera Forms, a drag-and-drop form builder for WordPress.
Woohoo!
Woo! And my question to you is, now that Gutenberg is out, how are we going to tell people outside of WordPress about it? How are you going to make sure that people who have been burned by WordPress, people who fill their mouths on Twitter and elsewhere saying that WordPress sucks and to use something else, know that Gutenberg is out, that WordPress is better than ever, and that they need to try it out?
Yeah.
Good question, but the thing is
I asked you. You can't hit me back with a question.
Nice. Very nicely done.
Okay, this is officially the tougher question side of it. For all future WordCamps, go to the right side if you are going to ask the tougher things. I think we need to continue what we've been doing. Like, that's why I highlighted like how many WordCamp sessions, how many talks, et cetera, have been done on this. How we talk about it, there is an interesting question there on terminology. We're calling it the block editor. You know, so once it's in WordPress, it kind of is, I think within the interface, it makes more sense to refer it to the block editor. It's also easier to contrast a block editor to a classic editor. So that's a lot of the terminology that we've been using in new documentation. Outside of that, the Gutenberg name has really taken hold. It's also not trademarked or anything. So you can go to...
That's interesting. It's not trademarked, so you can do anything with it you want. Of course, it would have been an impossible name to trademark. But the interesting component there also is that I almost believe that in the coming couple of years, WordPress is no longer going to be known as WordPress. It's going to be known as Gutenberg. It's going to lose the WordPress moniker, or the WordPress moniker is going to be delegated to the back seat. And when people say Gutenberg, they're referring to WordPress since 5.0. So
that's a lot of the terminology that we've been using in new documentation. Outside of that, the Gutenberg name has really taken hold. It's also not trademarked or anything. So you can go to Drupal Gutenberg whatever it was, I don't remember. And that is the Drupal version of Gutenberg. And that's kind of beautiful because this now allows, we're not just affecting 32% of the web when we can make improvements. When we improve Gutenberg, that could potentially go even to other CMSs, even to other native mobile apps in the future. Maybe even other social networks can adopt it. Wouldn't it be cool if, like, when you're creating your emails on MailChimp or Constant Contact, that was a Gutenberg builder and had the same blocks? And perhaps they even allow you to...
I don't know. MailChimp is pretty similar. Uses blocks. Uses its own page builder. Why would they want to throw Gutenberg into that mess?
Port in the blocks from the open ecosystem so you can do cool things to it, and then they transform it into the HTML and CSS that's appropriate for email, just like the AMP plugin is transforming it into the subset that's appropriate for AMP sites. So this, I could have never even imagined that sort of adoption 5 or 10 years ago. I kind of wrote a public love letter to the Drees. Drupal is my other favorite open source project. I think they're really cool. We learn a lot from each other. And we'd talk, we'd hang out, we'd say, hey, is there anything we can do together? And we'd always come up like, oh, can we have plugins work across it? No, because then you have the data layers, and we both have our authentication, we both have all our functions, all the helpers. Like, it's hard to find something. But with Gutenberg, we've created a layer of abstraction that plausibly, not just in theory, but in reality, now has the same code running across Drupal and WordPress. And I think that is just even better than I could have imagined. So we need to continue to educate people, teach them how to use blocks, make more tutorials, make more block builders, and I think actually the built-in directories will help a lot. If we do it right, we can make it so that when you're in Gutenberg and you search for something that's not there, we can also show you the directory results. And by clicking on it, it'll in the background install a plugin, activate it, and then the block enters right there. It can be completely seamless. So again, you're not just building your site or page with what you happen to have installed. You're building with the wealth of flexibility and control that WordPress provides. So, all right. With that, thank you.
Thank you.
Before we break, I did want to show you a little video if you haven't seen this yet. We made a release video for 5.0 Bebo, but also shows a little bit of phase 2. So if you will grant me a minute, let's go ahead and click play here.
We'll give you the minute, Matt. All right, there's your minute. Notice the smattering of applause. It's like, meh.
Thank you all so much. What we accomplished this year, I didn't think was possible. So thank you all, and I appreciate it.
All right, that's it. Thank you for hanging in there to the very, very end. And that last little bit, that video, it's like, oh my God, it looks like I'm using WP Bakery or Elementor. What's the difference? So that was it. That was the state of the word, my commentary in it. It was only, an hour and 36 minutes long. It only took me 2 hours and 32 minutes to go through it. So I have an extra hour of commentary in there. Wow. And thank you, Greg, for hanging in there to the very end and for commenting throughout it. It's really much appreciated. Don't know who else was in there hanging in there watching us, but according to my stats here, 2 people have been watching us. We've had 3 and 4 people pop in. So maybe it'll get watched a bit down the line, but it was interesting to note. And on the whole, my final comments on this is that I see WordPress community splitting at this point. Not so much of a split that it's going to completely destroy WordPress. Their market share is going to take a massive hit, and that hit is going to go to Classic Press. And as I made comments before, part of the reason why is Gutenberg did not take into consideration businesses, medium to large businesses, medium-sized to large-sized businesses that are using it, and even a lot of small businesses that use it. In particular, though, it's going to be medium to large-sized businesses that have turned it into a platform for their company. Like, I manage websites for a couple of companies that are enterprise level, and one of them, we use WordPress for an intranet. And that intranet is critical to their business. You know, they've got several hundred employees and they need to make sure communications flow. And that's what the intranet is for. And they needed an intranet that was outside of their internal network. And that's what we built them with WordPress. And if I move that site to Gutenberg, I would break all of the custom coding, the custom fields, the custom layouts, all of the custom stuff that hours and weeks have gone into would just break, and it would become near impossible to work properly for it. So I won't be able to do that. So if I want to keep them on secured software going forward, my only option here is to go to Classic Press. And again, I have another client, same thing, big site. And again, we have so much customizations that have taken us beyond the WordPress core that, you know, we need to be able to stick with it. So this is going to be a problem, and they're going to see that. I had this similar discussion with Mayanne over at BlogAid, and she said, well, they're just doing what all those major companies did when they didn't upgrade from IE, back when many companies didn't do their upgrades and they kept using Internet Explorer. I said, no, this isn't exactly the same thing, because the software, the core software, the core files are what we need here, not the stuff we built on top of those core files. And when you change the core software in such a way that everything you built on top isn't going to work, but somebody else is going to take that core software and make that core software better without this ridiculous editor forced into it. And that's the problem. And I do have clients, though, that I will probably convert to Gutenberg, because they do a lot of things themselves. This will make some of their stuff easier. I'm going to be experimenting with it. You're going to see more of these live shows coming from me in the next couple of weeks. I'm rebuilding one of my other websites. It's my own personal pet project called The Rogues Tavern, where I do online gaming, streaming, and I do a stream every Sunday morning where I read the Bible out. It's really kind of an interesting thing, but I'm rebuilding the website, and I thought, well, I'm rebuilding it from scratch. What happens if I build it in Gutenberg? Let's see what Gutenberg's like from scratch. So I'm going to do one from scratch. Now I'm also going to take my primary website, johnoverall.com, my main moneymaker site. I'm going to create a dev site on it, and then I'm going to upgrade it to Gutenberg, and we're going to see what it does to my site. And I'm going to do all of that live, just so everyone can see what happens to it. So these will be interesting shows as I do them, just because I want to see what happens, and I want to share it with my audience and my viewership and see what they think about it, to have it live. So that's pretty much all I got. And back to the split, what I'm talking about, the split, I see 30% of the current WordPress community splitting off and going to Classic Press. And that may cut in even more. Now that split won't happen overnight. That split will happen over the next year, year and a half, the total for 30%. I figure a good 5% of WordPress community left this last weekend and either went to other platforms or went right to Classic Press, which massively gained audience. So, and then I see the other 60% hanging around. And when I was talking to Mayanne, she was talking about, oh, the developers are going to hang in there. And I said, yeah, your big developers are going to hang in there with it, because they have tied their fortunes to WordPress. You're talking about Yoast. You're talking about, I'm trying to think some of the others. There's a couple of big majors, maybe Gravity Forms, maybe Studio Press themes, those things there, yeah, they're going to stick around because they're tied to WordPress in such a major way that they couldn't afford to take a 60% hit in their income by following along to Classic Press. And Nick's not for a while. And personally, because I do a show on plugins, what's going to happen is the WP Plugins show is going to start including plugins that are compatible with Classic Press, because I'm going to be in both camps for a while. I'm going to have to work with both. So I'm going to include plugins that are compatible and working in Classic Press. It's going to be a segment in the show, and eventually I'm also going to include a segment into the show that talks about the blocks for Gutenberg. So this is going to be what's going to happen. And Classic Press at the hosting level, well, take a while. And you could think about WordPress. If you've been around the community, well, you've been around it quite a while, Greg. But as long as I've been around in 10 years, you know, I've watched WordPress go from a blog, because when I found WordPress, it was basically a blog you could enhance and do some things with. And then they came out with 3.0 and custom post types, and I knew that was the game changer. That was the game changer of all game changers for it. All of a sudden, you could create e-commerce stores and create this and create that, and it's like, oh my God, it's going to become a CMS. And it did become a CMS. And it took a few years before the hosting platforms made it a default thing to set up as an option at the hosting level. Classic Press will do the same thing. Like right now, one of their big things at Classic Press, they are in the process of cleaning up the code, the core code that WordPress.org didn't want to clean up. They're bringing the code up to date to make the minimum version of PHP to be 7.1. They're cleaning up a lot of backwards compatibility stuff, which is going to be a problem. They're streamlining the code. They're getting rid of bloat. They're doing a whole lot of stuff to the code. So what's going to happen is for the next 6 months or so, I imagine Classic Press and WordPress will be neck and neck. And then what's going to happen is Classic Press is going to evolve in its own direction as the community grows around it. And WordPress will continue to evolve down the Gutenberg path, which was one other reason why I think it's going to just be called Gutenberg. Is that people are going to say Gutenberg and they know they're talking about the original WordPress, and they're going to say Classic Press and they know they're talking about the fork, which is, you know, and they're going to go after separate market segments for the most part, is what I see. I could be wrong, but I haven't been too wrong in many of the things I've seen in this community and the predictions I've made. You can go back through my shows and see the predictions I've made of where things were going and what was going to happen. You can see I was accurate, you know, a good 60-70% of the time. Nobody's 100% accurate. If they were, well, we would all be multimillionaires and never have to work a day in our lives. But that pretty much wraps it up. Thanks a lot. I really appreciate it to all the people that dropped in and listened, at least for 5 minutes or so, and for you two listeners here, Greg and the other fellow, whoever it was out there that hung in there for the full 2 hours and 41 minutes that this show took tonight. So thank you very much, and that's all I've got for you. Take care. Make sure you tune in on Thursdays, 12 o'clock noon Pacific Standard Time. That's when I do the live show for WP Plugins A to Z, and I'll have a show coming up this Thursday at noon. So you all have a good one. I'm going to let my girl take us out of here, and have a good night.
Reminders for the show. All the show notes can be found at WPPluginsA2Z.com. And while you're there, subscribe to the Friday newsletter for more useful information delivered directly to your inbox. WP Plugins A to Z is a show that offers honest and unbiased reviews of plugins created by developers because you support the show. Help keep the show honest and unbiased by going to WPPluginsA2Z.com/donate and set the donation level that fits your budget. Help us make the show better for you by subscribing and reviewing the show at Stitcher Radio, Google Play, and in the iTunes Store. You can also watch the show live on YouTube, check out the screencasts and training videos, and remember to subscribe and hit the bell to get notifications of all new videos. Also, follow the show on Twitter at WPPluginsA2Z. John can be reached at his website at johnoverall.com or send him an email, john@wppro.ca. Thanks for joining us and have a great day.
Thanks for listening to the show. This show is copyright by johnoverall.com. So until next time, have yourselves a good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you happen to be out there on the globe today.